The spotlight burned against my eyelids even after I closed them, a phantom heat that lingered like everything else in the velvet room. The smoke, the whiskey-soaked laughter, the weight of too many broken promises hanging in the stale air. My fingers found the microphone stand instinctively, the cool metal grounding me as I swayed through the final notes of "Cry Me a River," my voice dropping to that husky whisper that made drunk men lean forward and sober women look away. 11:30 on a Tuesday night, and the club was half empty, which meant Marco would be in a mood. I could see him from the corner of my eye, his bulky frame blocking the backstage entrance, arms crossed over his chest in that way that said the conversation we'd have after my set wouldn't be pleasant. 3 months behind on what I owed him, and he was done pretending patience. The loan had seemed reasonable when I'd signed those papers 2 years ago, desperate to keep my mother's treatments going. $50,000 at what he'd called friendly interest. I'd been too naive to understand that friendly and legal were very different things. The piano player, sweet old Raymond, with his arthritic fingers and kind eyes, gave me an encouraging nod as I held the final note, letting it tremble and break, just enough to sound real. The applause that followed was scattered, polite, the kind you get from people who came for the ambiance and stayed out of inertia. I smiled anyway, that practiced curve of lips that never quite reached my eyes, and murmured my thanks into the microphone. "You've been a wonderful audience. We'll take a 15-minute break." Wonderful was generous, but lies were currency in places like this, and I'd learned to spend them freely. I stepped down from the small stage, my heel catching briefly on the worn carpet before I steadied myself. The black dress I wore, sequined, borrowed, 2 sizes too big but cinched tight with safety pins, whispered against my thighs as I moved toward the bar. I needed water. My throat felt raw from singing 4 sets a night, 6 nights a week, my voice the only thing keeping me from complete destitution now that Mom was gone, and all I had left were her medical bills and Marco's escalating threats. "Diana." Marco's voice cut through the ambient noise, sharp and expectant. "My office. Now." I pretended not to hear, signaling instead to Jimmy behind the bar. He poured water into a smudged glass without being asked, his expression sympathetic in that useless way of people who felt sorry for you but wouldn't actually help. I drank it too fast, the cold hitting my empty stomach like a fist, reminding me I'd skipped dinner again. Money for food or money for rent. Never enough for both. "Diana." This time Marco's hand landed on my shoulder, heavy and possessive. I turned slowly, arranging my face into something apologetic and weary, the look that sometimes bought me an extra day or two. "I'm just getting some water, Marco. 5 minutes." "You've had 3 months of 5 minutes." His fingers tightened, not quite painful, but promising it could be. "My office. Or we have this conversation out here." The handful of remaining patrons weren't paying attention, lost in their own private miseries and second-rate vodka. But Jimmy was watching, and I caught the flicker of concern in his eyes before he looked away. No one wanted trouble with Marco. He owned the Velvet Room, but everyone knew his real business wasn't jazz clubs and watered-down drinks. It was enforcement, collections, making problems disappear. I was becoming a problem. "Okay," I said quietly, setting down the glass. 5 minutes. His office was exactly what you'd expect. Cluttered desk, filing cabinets that probably held more secrets than documents, the faint smell of cigars and something sharper, more chemical. He closed the door behind us with a deliberate click that made my pulse jump, then moved around to sit in his chair, forcing me to stand like a schoolgirl called to the principal's office. "You're a smart woman, Diana, talented even." He leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "So, I know you understand the situation you're in. I'm working on it. Another few weeks and I'll have..." "Another few weeks?" He laughed, a sound without humor. "You said that last month, and the month before. The interest keeps compounding, sweetheart. You're not catching up. You're drowning." The truth of it sat like lead in my chest. I owed him $87,000 now, a number that had grown from 50 like a malignant thing, feeding on my inability to pay. My mother's funeral had cost $12,000. The back rent on her apartment that I'd felt obligated to cover, another $6,000. The rest had been eaten by interest rates that would make a loan shark blush, which was essentially what Marco was, just with a liquor license and a legitimate business's cover. I'll pick up more shifts. There's that wedding reception next week, and I have another option. He opened a drawer, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the desk toward me. There's a private party this Friday. Very exclusive. High rollers. They're looking for entertainment. I stared at the folder without touching it. What kind of entertainment? Singing, Diana. What else? His smile was meant to be reassuring. It wasn't. These are gentlemen who appreciate class. Real talent. You'd perform for 2 hours, maybe 3. They'd pay handsomely, and I'd be willing to knock $20,000 off what you owe. $20,000 for one night. It should have sounded too good to be true, and in the pause that followed, I felt the weight of every bad decision I'd ever made pressing down on my shoulders. But I also felt the phantom weight of bills stuffed in my mailbox, the eviction notice I hadn't opened yet, the desperate mathematics of survival that never quite added up. Where's the party? Private estate outside the city. Don't worry about details. Car picks you up at 9, brings you home when you're done. He leaned forward, his expression almost paternal. This could solve your problems, Diana, or at least buy you time to figure something out. Time. That precious commodity I was always running out of, always negotiating for. I reached for the folder, my fingers trembling slightly as I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper with an address, a time, and a name I didn't recognize. D. Kane. Who's D. Kane? Your host for the evening, a businessman, discreet tastes, deep pockets. Marco waved dismissively. All you need to know is he pays well and expects professionalism. The word professionalism hung in the air between us, loaded with implications I didn't want to examine. I'd heard stories about private parties, about women who went expecting one thing and found themselves trapped in situations they couldn't escape. But I'd also heard stories about people who crossed Marco, and those stories never ended well. Just singing, I said, needing to hear him confirm it. Nothing else, just singing. He stood, moving around the desk to pat my shoulder again. That same heavy touch that felt more like a claim than comfort. You're a good girl, Diana. Smart. You'll make the right choice. I left his office clutching the folder, my mind churning through possibilities and consequences. Friday was 3 days away. 3 days to decide if I was desperate enough to walk into a stranger's private party, to sing for men whose names I didn't know and whose business I shouldn't question. Raymond caught my arm as I headed back toward the stage, his weathered face creased with worry. Everything okay, honey? Fine. The lie tasted bitter. Just working out a payment plan. Marco's not a patient man. Raymond's grip tightened briefly, urgent. And he's got connections to people who make him look like a saint. You be careful, Diana. Whatever he's offering, the price is always higher than they say. I wanted to tell him I knew that I wasn't naive, that I'd weighed my options and found them all wanting. But the words stuck in my throat, tangled up with fear and exhaustion and that desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, this would be the break I needed. The second set passed in a blur. I sang the standards. Summertime, At Last, The Man I Love. My voice on autopilot while my mind spun through scenarios. $20,000. It wouldn't clear my debt, but it would give me breathing room. Time to find a better paying job, to figure out a real plan instead of this night-to-night survival that was slowly killing me. By the time I finished at 2 a.m., my feet ached and my voice felt shredded. I changed in the cramped bathroom that doubled as a dressing room, trading the sequined dress for jeans and a sweater, scrubbing off the stage makeup until I looked like myself again, pale, hollow-eyed, unremarkable. The woman in the mirror looked older than 28, worn down by circumstances she couldn't control and choices she couldn't take back. The folder sat in my bag like a loaded gun as I walked the 6 blocks to my apartment, my keys threaded through my fingers just in case. The neighborhood was quiet at this hour, mostly working people who woke early and kept to themselves. But I'd learned to be wary of shadows, of sounds that didn't belong. My apartment was a studio on the 4th floor, no elevator, the kind of place that charged too much for too little because it was all most people could afford. Inside, it smelled like old coffee and the lavender air freshener I'd stopped being able to afford. I dropped my bag on the counter, made tea I wouldn't drink, and sat on the futon that served as both couch and bed, staring at the folder. 3 days. I opened it again, reading the details more carefully this time. The address was in Blackwood Estates, an area I'd only seen from the highway. Gated communities and sprawling mansions where people like me only entered to clean or serve. The time was 9 p.m. The dress code, formal. There was a phone number at the bottom with instructions to call 24 hours before to confirm. My phone buzzed, making me jump. A text from an unknown number. Heard you're considering the Kane party. Good opportunity. Don't waste it. M. Marco. Of course, making sure I knew he was watching, that I understood this wasn't really a choice. I set the phone down and pulled my knees to my chest, trying to quiet the voice in my head that said this was a mistake, that nothing good happened at parties where the host's full name wasn't even used, where the pay was too good and the details were too vague. But louder than that voice was the memory of my mother's last words, whispered through morphine and exhaustion. You're stronger than you think. Baby, you'll survive this. She'd meant the grief, the loss. But survival took many forms, and sometimes it meant making choices that didn't feel like choices at all. Friday, 9 p.m. Kane. I'd go. I'd sing. I'd take the money and buy myself time to figure out the next impossible thing, and if it turned out to be a mistake, well, I was getting good at those. Friday arrived with the kind of gray autumn rain that made the city look like a faded photograph, all washed out colors and blurred edges. I spent the day in a state of anxious preparation, trying on every piece of clothing I owned before settling on the only formal dress I had. A deep burgundy number I'd worn to my mother's funeral, altered with a higher hemline and lower back to make it look less mournful. The fabric clung to curves I'd lost weight from, but with the right lighting and enough confidence, it would pass for elegant rather than desperate. By 8:30, I was standing outside my building, clutching a small clutch purse that held only my phone, keys, and the emergency $20 bill I kept folded in my wallet. The rain had softened to a drizzle, and the street gleamed under the amber glow of streetlights, empty except for the occasional passing car. At precisely 9, a black sedan pulled up to the curb, so dark it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The windows were tinted to full opacity, and when the back door opened from the inside, I couldn't see who or what waited within. Miss Diana Reeves? A man's voice, professional and neutral, came from the darkness. Yes. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Mr. Kane is expecting you. Please. I hesitated for only a second before ducking into the car, the door closing behind me with a solid thunk that sounded too much like finality. The interior was leather and luxury, climate-controlled perfection that smelled faintly of sandalwood, and something darker, more masculine. A privacy partition separated me from the driver, and I was alone in the back seat, with nothing but my racing thoughts and the city sliding past the tinted windows. We drove for 40 minutes, leaving behind the familiar grid of downtown for wider streets, then highways, then roads that wound through areas I'd only glimpsed from bus windows. The houses grew larger, set back from the road behind gates and walls, their windows glowing with warm light that spoke of lives I'd never understand. Security, stability, the luxury of not counting every dollar. Blackwood Estates appeared like something from a movie, an actual gatehouse with a guard who waved our car through without checking identification. The roads inside were perfect, lined with mature trees that formed a canopy overhead, their leaves catching the rain in a gentle susurrus that was almost soothing. The houses here weren't just houses. They were monuments to wealth, sprawling structures of stone and glass that probably had more square footage than my entire apartment building. The car turned down a private drive that seemed to go on forever, winding through manicured grounds where artful lighting illuminated gardens I could barely make out through the rain. Then the house came into view, and my breath caught despite myself. It was massive but somehow understated, all clean lines and modern architecture softened by traditional stonework. Wings extended from a central structure, lights glowing from what seemed like dozens of windows, and a fountain dominated the circular drive where the car finally stopped. Through the rain, I could see other vehicles, expensive ones, the kind with names I recognized from movies and music videos. The driver appeared with an umbrella, escorting me to the front entrance where double doors stood open, revealing a foyer that belonged in a museum. Marble floors, a chandelier that probably cost more than my entire debt, artwork on the walls that even my untrained eye recognized as significant. A woman in a crisp suit appeared, her smile professional and unwelcoming in equal measure. "Miss Reeves, this way, please." I followed her through corridors that seemed designed to intimidate, each room we passed more opulent than the last. She led me to what appeared to be a small staging area, a room with mirrors, a clothing rack, a vanity stocked with makeup and hair supplies. "You have 30 minutes to prepare," the woman said crisply. "The performance space is through that door." She indicated a heavy wooden door on the far wall. "You'll perform 3 sets of 40 minutes each, with 15-minute breaks between. Mr. Kane expects a diverse repertoire, standards, but also contemporary pieces interpreted in your style. Any questions?" "Where's the audience?" I asked, my voice sounding small in the elegant space. "That's not your concern. Perform as though the room is full. Mr. Kane values authenticity." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Miss Reeves? Mr. Kane values discretion even more. What you see and hear tonight stays here. Understood?" It wasn't really a question. I nodded, and she disappeared, leaving me alone with my reflection and the growing certainty that I'd made a terrible mistake. I used the 30 minutes to transform myself into someone who belonged here, someone confident and untouchable. The makeup went on heavier than I usually wore it, dramatic eyes and dark lips that made me look like I knew secrets. I pinned my dark hair up in a style that was elegant, but effortless, leaving a few strands loose to soften the effect. The burgundy dress looked better under these lights, and I added the only piece of jewelry I owned, my mother's silver locket, hidden beneath the fabric against my heart. When the knock came, I was as ready as I'd ever be. The performance space was smaller than I expected, intimate rather than grand. A piano sat in one corner, no pianist in sight. But I saw the speakers discreetly placed around the room and realized accompaniment would be recorded. The lighting was low, atmospheric, casting shadows that made it hard to see into the corners. And then I noticed the audience. There were perhaps 8 men scattered throughout the space, some seated in leather armchairs, others standing near a bar that ran along one wall. They wore suits that cost more than cars, watches that probably had names, and carried themselves with the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about money or consequences. But it was the man standing nearest to the small stage who made my breath catch, and my heart stutter into a different rhythm entirely. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with the kind of presence that made everyone else in the room seem like extras in his movie. Dark hair swept back from a face that was all sharp angles and controlled intensity. Strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes so dark they looked black in the low light. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin, tailored to emphasize broad shoulders and a lean, powerful build. But it was his stillness that truly caught my attention. While the other men shifted and talked in low voices, he stood absolutely motionless, watching me with an intensity that felt physical. This, I knew with absolute certainty, was D. Kane. Our eyes met across the room, and something electric passed between us. Recognition without knowing, danger without context. His expression revealed nothing, but I saw his hand tighten slightly around the glass he held, the only indication that my presence affected him at all. The woman who'd shown me in appeared at my elbow. "Whenever you're ready, Miss Reeves." I moved toward the microphone on instinct, my body knowing what to do even while my mind spun with questions and warnings. The room fell silent as I adjusted the stand, as I found my center, as I prepared to sell my voice to men who'd bought things more precious than songs. "Good evening," I said softly, letting my voice carry through the perfect acoustics. "I'm Diana Reeves, and I'll be your entertainment tonight." The word entertainment tasted wrong, but I swallowed it and cued the first track, a slow, sultry version of Fever that I'd arranged myself. The music filled the space, and I fell into it like diving into deep water, letting everything else fall away, except the notes and the story the song told. I'd sung this song 100 times, 1,000, but never like this. Every word felt weighted with meaning I hadn't intended, every pause charged with something dangerous. I kept my eyes closed for most of it, unable to bear the intensity of Kane's stare. But when I opened them for the final verse, he'd moved closer, now standing just feet from the stage, his dark eyes fixed on me with an expression I couldn't read. The song ended. Silence stretched for a heartbeat, 2, before polite applause rippled through the room. But Kane didn't applaud. He just watched, his jaw tight, something that might have been recognition or hunger or anger flickering across his features. I moved into the next song, then the next, building a set that took them from sultry to sorrowful to defiant. I sang Billie Holiday and Etta James, Nina Simone and Amy Winehouse, pouring everything I had into making these men forget I was a hired performer and remember I was human, worthy. More than just a voice they'd paid to fill their expensive silence. 40 minutes passed like 40 seconds and 40 hours simultaneously. When I finished the first set, I was sweating despite the perfect climate control, my throat raw and my nerves frayed. The woman reappeared to escort me back to the preparation room, but Kane's voice stopped me halfway across the space. "Miss Reeves." His voice was deep, cultured, with an edge that suggested violence carefully controlled. A moment. I turned, my heart hammering, and found him standing closer than I'd realized, close enough that I could smell his cologne, something expensive and dark, wood smoke and leather and something uniquely him. Up close, he was even more devastating, his face a study in masculine perfection, marred only by a small scar above his left eyebrow, and eyes that held too many secrets. "Your interpretation of strange fruit was..." He paused, seeming to search for words. "Unexpected. Where did you train?" I didn't, not formally. The truth came out before I could calculate a better answer. I learned by listening, by feeling. Something shifted in his expression. "You sing like someone who's known loss." It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. "We all know loss, Mr. Kane. Some of us just have better ways of expressing it." His eyes narrowed slightly, and I realized I'd been too honest, too personal. These weren't the kinds of men you challenged or spoke to as equals. But before I could apologize or retreat, he smiled, a slight curve of lips that held no warmth. "Interesting. Most performers tonight would have flattered me. You speak truth instead." He took a sip of whatever was in his glass, never breaking eye contact. "I appreciate truth, Miss Reeves. It's a rare commodity in my world." "And what world is that?" The question escaped before I could stop it, born of exhaustion and fear, and the strange electricity that seemed to crackle in the air between us. His smile widened fractionally. One you shouldn't be curious about. He gestured toward the preparation room. Take your break. I'll expect the same honesty in your next set. Dismissed, I retreated on shaking legs, acutely aware of his eyes following me until I disappeared through the door. The preparation room felt like a sanctuary, and I collapsed onto the small sofa, trying to calm my racing heart. What was I doing? This wasn't just singing for rich men. There was something else happening here. Something in the way Kane looked at me, in the tension that filled the room whenever we spoke. My phone buzzed. Marco. How's it going? I stared at the message, my fingers hovering over the screen. How did I explain that I felt like I'd walked into something far more dangerous than a private party? That the host looked at me like I was a puzzle he intended to solve, a problem he intended to eliminate? Fine, I typed back. First set done. His response was immediate. Good girl. Remember, discretion. Kane's not someone you want to displease. The warning sent ice through my veins. What did Marco know about Kane that he hadn't told me? What had I walked into? The second set was harder. Kane had moved to an armchair directly in front of the stage, his posture relaxed but his attention absolute. The other men in the room seemed to fade into the background, becoming irrelevant, until it felt like I was performing only for him. His dark eyes never left my face, tracking every movement, every breath, and I found myself singing to him specifically, choosing songs that felt like confessions. I put a spell on you. You don't own me. Ain't no sunshine. Each song was a battle, a negotiation, a conversation conducted in melody and silence. When I sang about spells and ownership and absence, his expression never changed. But I saw his fingers tighten on his glass, saw the muscle in his jaw flex, saw the way he leaned forward almost imperceptibly, as though drawn by gravity he couldn't resist. The set ended, and this time when the woman came to escort me to break, Kane rose and followed. I heard his footsteps behind me in the corridor, measured and inevitable, and when I reached the preparation room, he was there, filling the doorway with his presence. That's not appropriate, the woman began, but Kane cut her off with a look. Leave us. She hesitated only a second before obeying, and then we were alone, and the room felt suddenly too small, the air too thin. You're not what I expected, Kane said, closing the door behind him with a soft click. He moved into the room with predatory grace, backing me up until my legs hit the sofa. Marco said you were desperate, a singer with debts and nowhere else to turn. Hearing it said so bluntly made shame burn through me. He wasn't wrong. No. Kane tilted his head, studying me like I was an equation he was solving. But he failed to mention you have a voice that could bring men to their knees. That you sing like you're confessing sins. That you're exactly what I've been searching for. The words should have been flattering. Instead, they terrified me. I don't understand. You will. He reached out, and I flinched reflexively, but he only picked up a strand of hair that had come loose from my arrangement, rubbing it between his fingers as though testing its reality. I have a proposition for you, Diana Reeves, one that will solve all your problems. I'm just here to sing. Are you? His smile was predatory. Or are you here because Marco owns your debt, and men like Marco don't give opportunities without expecting something in return? The truth of it sat heavy between us. I said nothing, and his smile widened. I thought so. He released my hair and stepped back, giving me space I desperately needed. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to finish your third set. You're going to accept payment from Marco, and you're going to think you're walking away from this with your problems reduced. His eyes darkened. But you won't be, because I'm going to buy your debt from Marco. Every penny. And then, Diana Reeves, You're going to belong to me." The words hit like a physical blow. "You can't." "I can. I have. The transaction was completed 15 minutes ago while you were singing about ownership." His voice was matter of fact, as though he'd just described buying a car or a painting. Marco was quite happy to sell. He'd already gotten what he needed from you. My mind reeled, trying to process what he was saying. "What did you need from me? Why would you buy my debt?" Kane moved closer again, and this time when he reached out, it was to trace one finger along my jaw, the touch electric and terrifying. "Because from the moment you opened your mouth and sang, I knew. You're the key to everything I've been planning. The perfect cover, the ideal distraction, the instrument I need to destroy the people who murdered my family." The room spun. His family. Murder. Destroy. The words didn't make sense, couldn't make sense, but the deadly certainty in his eyes told me he meant every word. "I need to leave." I tried to move past him, but he blocked my path without touching me, his body a wall I couldn't cross. "You can't. Not anymore. My men are stationed at every exit. The driver who brought you here takes orders only from me. And even if you could somehow escape this house, where would you go? Back to Marco, who's already spent the money I paid him. Back to your apartment, where my people are waiting." He leaned in close enough that I could feel his breath against my ear. "You're mine now, Diana, and you'll sing for me. Not 3 sets, every day. For however long I need you. This is kidnapping." My voice shook, but I forced the words out. "Someone will." "No one will." He pulled back, his expression almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. "No one knows you're here except Marco, who won't talk. No one will miss you except maybe that bartender at the club, and he won't risk asking questions. You're a ghost, Diana. You've been invisible so long that no one will notice when you vanish completely." The truth of it was devastating. He was right. I had no family, no close friends, no job that would miss me for more than a night or two. I'd spent so long surviving that I'd forgotten to build anything worth surviving for. "Why?" I whispered. "Why me?" Kane's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Because 15 years ago, I heard a voice on a radio that saved my life. A woman singing in a language I didn't understand, but with feeling I recognized. Grief and rage, and the determination to survive despite it all. I was hiding in a warehouse, bleeding out, watching the people who'd killed my father and brother burn our family's business to the ground. I should have died there, but that voice kept me conscious long enough for help to arrive. It became my reason to survive. My reminder that beauty could exist even in darkness." He paused, his dark eyes boring into mine. "Your voice, Diana. You were that woman. I've been searching for you ever since." The words should have sounded insane. They probably were insane. But the conviction in his voice, the rawness in his expression, made them feel true. And even more terrifying, they made a part of me want to believe him, to matter that much to someone, to be remembered for something other than my debts and failures. I don't remember any radio broadcast 15 years ago. I would have been 13. You were. Singing in a church charity event that got recorded and played on a local station. Ave Maria in Latin, voice breaking with adolescent imperfection and pure emotion. He pulled out his phone, tapped a few times, and sound filled the room. A girl's voice, young and uncertain, but achingly beautiful. Singing words I hadn't thought about in 15 years. My voice. My past. The last time I'd sung in church before my father left and everything fell apart. "How do you have this?" I breathed. "I've spent a fortune tracking it down. Spent years trying to find the girl who sang it." His smile was grim. And now I have. Now you're going to help me finish what they started. You're going to be my weapon. Diana, my beautiful, broken weapon that destroys from within. Before I could respond, before I could process any of this, the door opened, and the woman from before appeared, her expression carefully neutral. Mr. Kane, your guests are inquiring about the final set. Of course. He straightened, smoothing his jacket, transforming from intense to urbane in a heartbeat. Miss Reeves will be ready in 5 minutes. He looked at me, and his eyes held both warning and promise. Won't you, Diana? What choice did I have? I nodded numbly, and he swept from the room, leaving me alone with my shattered illusions and the growing realization that I hadn't just sold my voice tonight. I'd sold my freedom, and the price would be far higher than I'd ever imagined. The third set was torture disguised as performance. I sang mechanically, my voice functioning on muscle memory while my mind spun through the impossible reality Kane had created. Every song felt like a countdown to something I couldn't name, each note bringing me closer to the moment when the performance would end, and I'd have to face what came next. Kane had returned to his chair, but his posture had changed. No longer the casual observer, but the owner taking inventory of his newest acquisition. The other men in the room had grown louder with alcohol, their conversation a low rumble beneath my singing. But Kane remained silent and focused, his dark eyes tracking every breath I took. I chose my final song carefully, a decision born from defiance or desperation. I wasn't sure which. I Will Survive, the ultimate anthem of resilience, though singing it in a slow, haunting arrangement that stripped away the disco triumph and left only the raw determination underneath. If Kane wanted honesty in my performance, I'd give him honesty that bordered on rebellion. At first I was afraid. I was petrified. His expression didn't change, but I saw his fingers tighten around his glass, saw the almost imperceptible tension in his jaw. He knew exactly what message I was sending, and the slight curve of his lips suggested he appreciated the challenge even as he prepared to crush it. When the final note faded into silence, the applause was more enthusiastic than before. The other guests had loosened up considerably over the past 3 hours. But Kane didn't applaud. He simply stood, his movement causing the room to fall silent, and addressed his guests with the easy authority of someone accustomed to absolute obedience. Gentlemen, thank you for attending tonight. Marcus will show you to your cars. It was clearly a dismissal, and within minutes the room had emptied, leaving only Kane, myself, and 2 men who'd appeared from somewhere to stand flanking the exits. Security, I realized, dressed in dark suits that couldn't quite hide the weapons I was certain they carried. That was provocative, Kane said, moving toward me with that predatory grace. I will survive. A message for me, or for yourself? Does it matter? My voice came out steadier than I felt. We both know I'm not leaving here tonight. Perceptive. He reached the stage, extending his hand as though inviting me to dance rather than imprisoning me. Come. We have much to discuss, and you must be exhausted. I ignored his hand, stepping down on my own, though my legs trembled with fatigue and adrenaline. Where are you taking me? To your new accommodations. I had a suite prepared when I realized Marco's singer might be the voice I'd been searching for. He gestured toward one of his security men. Victor will bring your things from your apartment. Is there anything of particular sentimental value you want to ensure isn't missed? The casual assumption that he could simply erase my life and rebuild it according to his specifications made rage flare through my exhaustion. You can't just... I can. I have. We've established this. His voice hardened slightly. You can accept it with grace, or I can have you carried to your room. Either way, the outcome is the same. You're staying, Diana. The only question is whether you'll make this difficult for yourself. I thought about running, about screaming, about fighting, But I was one woman in a house full of his people, miles from anywhere, with no allies and no resources. Marco had already taken his money and disappeared me as thoroughly as if I'd died. Kane was right about that too. No one would miss me. No one would search. No one would even know I was gone until it was far too late. "There's a photo album," I said finally, hating the defeat in my voice. "Blue fabric cover, in the bottom drawer of my dresser. And my mother's jewelry box. Wood, carved with roses. That's all." Something flickered in his expression. Approval, perhaps, or satisfaction that I'd capitulated so quickly. "Victor, you heard her. Bring everything from the apartment. I want it emptied by morning." Victor nodded and disappeared, leaving me alone with Kane and the remaining guard. Kane offered his arm formally, as though we were attending a society function rather than enacting my captivity. "Shall we?" I didn't take his arm, but I walked where he indicated, through corridors that grew progressively more private, away from the public areas where he'd entertained his guests. We climbed a staircase of polished marble, passed through a hallway lined with artwork that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, and finally stopped before a set of double doors that Kane opened with a keycard. "Your suite," he announced, stepping aside to let me enter first. I'd expected a bedroom, maybe luxurious but still clearly a cage. What I found instead stole my breath. A full apartment, easily 3 times the size of my actual apartment, decorated in shades of cream and gold with modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a design magazine. Floor-to-ceiling windows dominated one wall, currently showing only darkness and rain, but presumably offering a view during daylight. A full kitchen occupied one corner, a sitting area with a fireplace another, and through an open door I could see a bedroom with a bed large enough to sleep 4. "The bathroom is through there," Kane said, pointing to another door. "Closet adjacent. I've taken the liberty of having appropriate clothing provided, though you're welcome to wear your own things once Victor delivers them. There's a computer with internet access, though monitored, and a television. Books, if you prefer." He moved to the kitchen, opening the refrigerator to show it fully stocked. "Meals can be brought up, or you're welcome to cook. My chef is available for requests." "It's a very pretty cage," I said flatly. "It's whatever you make it. A cage implies punishment. This is protection." He closed the refrigerator, turning to face me fully. "Do you know what happens to women who accumulate the kind of debt you had? Who attract Marco's attention? They disappear into trafficking networks, or they're used as leverage against people who matter more than they do, or they simply vanish when they're no longer useful." His voice dropped lower, more intense. "I've saved you from that, Diana. Whatever you think of me, whatever you believe my intentions are, I've given you safety you couldn't provide for yourself." "Safety," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Is that what you call kidnapping?" "I call it a transaction. Your debt for your voice, your protection for your cooperation. You sing when I need you to sing. You appear where I need you to appear. And in return you live in luxury most people can only dream of. No more scraping together rent. No more choosing between food and electricity. No more Marco." He moved closer, and I instinctively backed up until I hit the wall. "And no more freedom. At least not in the way you're used to." "But were you really free before, Diana? Or were you just a different kind of prisoner?" The question hit too close to truth. I'd been trapped by debt, by circumstance, by the endless cycle of survival that never allowed me to truly live. But at least it had been my trap, my choices, my consequences. "Why do you need me?" I asked, needing to understand. "You said I'm a weapon, a distraction. For what?" Kane studied me for a long moment, as though calculating how much to reveal. Finally, he stepped back, giving me space, and moved to the windows to stare out at the rain-soaked darkness. 15 years ago, my family controlled most of the legitimate business in this city: real estate, shipping, hospitality. My father built an empire from nothing, brought our name from Sicily to America, and made it matter. We were respected, feared, powerful. His voice was controlled, but I heard the emotion beneath it, rage and grief carefully contained. Then a rival organization decided our territory looked profitable. The Volkov Bratva, Russian Mafia with ambitions that exceeded their reach. They wanted what we'd built, wanted to expand from their drugs and weapons into our legitimate holdings. He turned from the window, his face cast in shadow. My father refused their buyout offer, said the Volkov name would never appear on Kane properties, so they decided to remove the Kane name entirely. His jaw tightened. They hit 3 of our buildings simultaneously: a restaurant, a shipping warehouse, and the office building where my father and older brother were working late. Burned them all. Killed 17 people, including my father and Alessandro, my brother. I survived because I wasn't supposed to be there. I'd cut out early to meet a girl, was 3 blocks away when the explosion started. I pressed back against the wall, horrified by the casual way he described mass murder. The police did nothing, couldn't prove anything. The Volkovs had alibis, witnesses, paper trails that looked legitimate. My mother tried to fight them through legal channels for 2 years before she gave up. The pause held volumes of pain. Took pills, left a note saying she couldn't live in a world where such evil went unpunished. I was 17, suddenly alone, and absolutely committed to destroying the people who destroyed my family. And you think I can help you do that? I couldn't keep the disbelief from my voice. I'm a jazz singer with debt problems, not an assassin. No, but you're exactly what I need to get close to them. The Volkovs have a weakness. Dmitry Volkov, the current head of their organization, fancies himself a patron of the arts. He hosts exclusive cultural events, surrounds himself with musicians and artists, uses his foundation to launder money while pretending to support creativity. Kane's smile was predatory. He's hosting a gala in 3 weeks. Invitation only, the most exclusive event of the season. Performers are carefully vetted, but his wife has been searching for a jazz vocalist with a particular sound. Sultry, classic, authentic. You, Diana, are exactly what she's described wanting. Understanding dawned, cold and terrifying. You want me to perform at their event, to be your spy. More than that, I want you to become their regular performer, their trusted artist, someone who can move through their world without raising suspicion. Someone who can tell me schedules, security details, who visits when, who drinks too much and talks too freely. He moved toward me again, his eyes intense. Someone who can help me dismantle them piece by piece until there's nothing left but ruins, the way they left my family. And if I refuse? The question was pointless. We both knew I had no leverage, but I needed to hear him say it. You won't. It wasn't a threat, just certainty. Because despite everything, Diana, I don't think you want to. I think you've spent so long being powerless that the chance to have actual impact, to matter in a way that transcends singing in dingy clubs for drunk patrons, appeals to you. I think you're tired of being invisible. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind my ear with surprising gentleness. And I think you understand, on some level, that we're the same. People who've lost everything, who've been forced to remake ourselves in the aftermath of devastation. The only difference is, I'm giving you the chance to be remade into something powerful, instead of something merely surviving. I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong about me, that I'd never help him commit what was essentially terrorism disguised as justice. But the words stuck in my throat because he wasn't entirely wrong. I was tired of struggling, of being afraid. of mattering to no one. And there was something seductive about the idea of actually having power, even if it was borrowed power, even if it came from a man who terrified me. "I need time to think," I said finally. "You have until morning." He moved toward the door, then paused. "The suite is secure, but I wouldn't recommend trying to leave. My security is thorough, and I'd hate for you to get hurt attempting something foolish." His expression softened slightly. "Rest, Diana. Eat something. Tomorrow we'll begin your training." "Training?" "You're going to need to be more than a singer. You'll need to be charming, educated about art and culture, capable of moving through high society without revealing your actual background. We have 3 weeks to transform you from Marco's desperate employee into someone the Volkovs will want in their inner circle." His smile held dark promise. "I'm very good at transformations." Then he was gone, the door closing behind him with a soft click that somehow sounded like a cell locking. I stood frozen for a long moment after he left, my mind spinning through everything that had happened in the past few hours. I'd walked into what I thought was a simple performance and found myself imprisoned by a man bent on revenge, expected to become complicit in what was essentially organized crime. My entire life erased and rebuilt to suit his purposes. I should have been planning escape, should have been looking for weaknesses in his security, should have been doing anything except what I actually did, which was walk to the windows and stare out at the rain, thinking about the strange truth Kane had spoken. Had I really been free before? Or just trapped differently? My apartment had been a cage of poverty, Marco's debt a chain I couldn't break, my life an endless cycle of survival with no hope of actual improvement. Kane's cage was certainly more comfortable, and the chain he offered came with the possibility of mattering, of having purpose beyond just existing. It was twisted logic, the kind of rationalization that probably led to every terrible decision ever made. But standing there in that beautiful prison, wearing a dead woman's dress and carrying a dead woman's dreams, I couldn't quite convince myself it was wrong. The sound of my phone buzzing made me jump. I'd forgotten I still had it, tucked in my clutch purse. I pulled it out to find a message from an unknown number. "Sleep well, Diana. Tomorrow we begin your resurrection. Kane." Of course. Watching even now, making sure I understood how complete his control was. I should have thrown the phone across the room, should have raged against the surveillance and manipulation. Instead, I found myself sinking onto the plush sofa, exhaustion finally overtaking adrenaline, and typing a single question. "Why did you really choose me?" The truth this time. The response came almost immediately. "Because when I heard you sing tonight, I heard the same grief and rage I've carried for 15 years. Because you're broken in the same places I am, and broken things either shatter completely or become weapons. I'm giving you the chance to be a weapon instead of a casualty. The question is whether you're brave enough to take it." I stared at the message for a long time, my mother's locket heavy against my heart, my voice raw from hours of singing, my entire world reduced to this moment of decision. Was I brave enough? Or was I just desperate enough that bravery and desperation look the same? Outside, the rain continued, washing away the person I'd been, and revealing someone I didn't recognize yet, someone who might be capable of exactly what Kane described. Someone who might walk into the enemy's house and smile while plotting their destruction. Someone who might become the weapon he needed, not because she had no choice, but because she'd finally been given a choice that mattered. I didn't answer his message, but I didn't throw away the phone either. Instead, I found my way to the bedroom, peeled off the burgundy dress that had seen me through my mother's funeral, and now my own metaphorical death, and crawled between sheets that cost more than a month's rent. Tomorrow would bring training, transformation, the beginning of whatever nightmare or adventure Kane had planned. But tonight, for the first time in longer than I could remember, I fell asleep without counting money, or worrying about bills, or wondering if I'd survive another day. Tonight, Someone else was doing the worrying, and that, I realized as consciousness faded, was a freedom of its own. Morning arrived with weak autumn sunlight filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating the strange luxury of my new reality. For several disoriented seconds, I forgot where I was, registering only the expensive sheets and unfamiliar ceiling before memory crashed back. Kane, the performance, the impossible choice that had been no choice at all. A knock at the door made me sit up abruptly, clutching the duvet to my chest despite wearing the silk pajamas I'd found laid out in the closet the night before. Yes? Breakfast, Miss Reeves. A woman's voice, professional and neutral. May I enter? I pulled on the matching robe, cinching it tightly before calling, Come in. The woman who entered wasn't the stern assistant from the night before, but someone younger, perhaps 30, with kind eyes and efficient movements. She wheeled in a cart laden with covered dishes that smelled incredible. Fresh bread, coffee that actually smelled like coffee instead of the burnt swill I was used to, fruit that looked like it belonged in a painting. I'm Teresa, she said, arranging items on the small dining table near the windows. I'll be helping you with your wardrobe and general needs while you're staying with Mr. Kane. He's asked that you eat well and be ready by 9 for your first session. Session? The word sounded ominous. Teresa's expression remained carefully neutral. Mr. Kane will explain. Is there anything else you need immediately? The items from your apartment arrived early this morning. Victor placed them in the closet. My things. The last pieces of my former life, now transplanted into this gilded cage. Thank you. She nodded and left, and I was alone with breakfast and the growing realization that this was my life now. Meals brought by staff, schedules set by Kane, every moment choreographed by someone else. The food was extraordinary, each bite reminding me that I'd been surviving on cheap takeout and day-old bagels for longer than I wanted to calculate. I ate methodically, trying to prepare mentally for whatever session Kane had planned. But anxiety made everything taste like cardboard, despite its obvious quality. At exactly 9, another knock. This time when I opened the door, it was Kane himself, dressed in dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Still expensive, still intimidating, but slightly less formal than the night before. His dark eyes swept over me, assessing. Good morning, Diana. I trust you slept well? As well as anyone who's been kidnapped. I couldn't quite keep the edge from my voice. His mouth quirked. Kidnapped suggests ransom. I have no intention of returning you. He gestured down the hallway. Come, we have much to accomplish today. I followed because what else could I do, acutely aware that I was barefoot and wearing only pajamas and a robe while he was fully dressed and in control. He led me through corridors I hadn't seen the night before, past rooms whose purposes I could only guess at, until we reached what appeared to be a library. Floor-to-ceiling shelves lined with books, leather furniture arranged around a fireplace, and a large desk covered in papers and files. A woman stood beside the desk, 40-ish and elegantly dressed, her gray-streaked dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She studied me with the kind of assessment that made me want to straighten my spine and smooth my hair. Diana, this is Sophia Marcelli. She'll be handling your etiquette and cultural education. Kane moved to the desk, leaning against it casually. Sophia has transformed rough edges into polished society fixtures more times than I can count. You're in excellent hands. Sophia's expression suggested she wasn't entirely convinced of that. Miss Reeves, please, sit. I perched on the edge of one leather armchair, feeling like a student called to the principal's office. Sophia remained standing, her posture perfect, her gaze critical. Mr. Kane has explained the situation and the timeline. 3 weeks is extremely short for the transformation required, but not impossible if you're willing to work hard. She picked up a tablet from the desk, scrolling through something. You'll need instruction in proper dinner etiquette, wine knowledge, art history, classical music beyond your jazz repertoire, current geopolitical affairs, and at least conversational knowledge of Russian language and culture. Additionally, we'll work on posture, speech patterns, and the subtle social cues that separate those born to wealth from those attempting to fake it. The list was overwhelming. That's impossible in 3 weeks. It's improbable, Sophia corrected. Impossible is a word for people without sufficient motivation. Mr. Kane assures me you're highly motivated. I glanced at Kane, who watched with an expression of calm certainty. I'm motivated to survive. Whether that extends to memorizing wine regions and learning Russian is debatable. It's not. Kane's voice was soft but absolute. The Volkovs are sophisticated, educated, and they've built their empire by being better than everyone around them. If you appear ignorant or uncultured, they'll dismiss you as entertainment rather than accepting you as someone worth knowing. And if they dismiss you, you're useless to me. The unspoken threat hung in the air. And if you're useless to me... I understand, I said quietly. Good. Sophia set down the tablet. We begin immediately. Mr. Kane, you can leave us. This will take several hours. Kane pushed off from the desk, moving toward the door, but paused beside my chair. Diana. I looked up at him, and his expression was oddly gentle. I know this seems overwhelming, but you're stronger than you realize. You survived poverty, loss, exploitation. You can survive this too. And when we're done, you'll be something more than a survivor. You'll be powerful. Then he was gone, leaving me with Sophia and the daunting reality of transformation. The next 6 hours were brutal. Sophia was relentless, correcting everything from how I held a wine glass to the way I sat, walked, spoke. She had me practice introductions dozens of times until I could extend my hand with the right amount of confidence, could make eye contact without seeming aggressive or submissive, could laugh at unfunny jokes in a way that sounded genuine. You slouch when you're uncomfortable, she noted during our 3rd hour. Shoulders back, chin level. Wealthy women don't apologize for taking up space. You end statements like they're questions, she said later. Speak with certainty, even when you're uncertain. People believe confidence. Your hands betray nervousness, she observed. Learn to keep them still unless you're deliberately gesturing. Every movement should have purpose. By lunch, which was brought to the library and consisted of food I had to eat with specific utensils while maintaining conversation, I felt like my entire identity was being dismantled and rebuilt. Every natural gesture was wrong. Every instinct needed correction. Every piece of my actual personality deemed inappropriate for the role I was being trained to play. Why does any of this matter? I asked during a rare break, exhaustion making me reckless. I'm going to sing, not give speeches. You're going to be observed, Sophia corrected. Every moment you're in their presence, they'll be assessing you. Are you worth knowing, worth trusting, worth bringing deeper into their circle? One wrong fork, one misplaced comment, one gesture that reveals your actual background, and you're finished before you begin. The afternoon brought different torture. Wine tasting, where I had to learn not just different varietals but regions, years, the proper vocabulary to discuss what I was tasting. Then art history, where Sophia showed me images of paintings and sculptures I'd need to recognize and comment on intelligently. Then music beyond jazz, opera, classical, contemporary composers the Volkovs might reference. My head spun with information, none of it sticking properly, all of it feeling artificial and impossible. You're trying too hard, Sophia said finally, sometime after 6. Stop attempting to memorize everything and instead understand the principle. Wealthy, cultured people speak about these things naturally because they've been exposed to them their entire lives. You need to seem like someone who's always had access to culture, not someone desperately cramming for a test. But I am someone desperately cramming for a test, I said, frustration bleeding through. I'm a jazz singer from a working-class background who's been kidnapped and forced to pretend to be something I'm not. How exactly do I make that seem natural? Sophia's expression softened slightly, the first crack in her professional facade. You find the truth in the lie. You are a talented performer. You do understand music on a deep level. You have experienced loss and hardship that gives you depth. These things are real. The Volkovs will respond to that authenticity, even as you're lying about everything else. Find the truth in the lie, I repeated. It sounded like something Kane would say. Mr. Kane is very good at this, Sophia said, as if reading my thoughts. He's built a legitimate business empire while carrying out a 15-year vendetta. He's charming at charity galas and ruthless in back rooms. He's learned to be both people simultaneously, to never let the mask slip. She gathered her materials. You'll need to learn the same. Tomorrow we continue at 8. Get rest. You'll need it. After she left, I remained in the library, too exhausted to move, my mind overflowing with information I couldn't quite organize. I'd gone from scrubbing stages to studying wine regions in 24 hours, and the whiplash was disorienting. You survived day 1. Kane's voice from the doorway made me jump. He'd changed into more casual clothes, jeans and a black sweater that somehow made him look both more approachable and more dangerous. Sophia says you're resistant, but not hopeless. High praise, I muttered. He crossed to where I sat, settling into the chair across from me with easy grace. It's difficult, I know. Having your entire identity dismantled and rebuilt to serve someone else's purposes. His dark eyes held something that might have been sympathy. I've done it myself. After my family died, I had to become someone new. Someone who could smile at business meetings while planning murder. Who could attend society functions while gathering information on my enemies. It's exhausting until it becomes natural. And if it never becomes natural? I asked quietly. If I can't learn to be two people at once? Then we adjust the plan. You're valuable to me, Diana, but not just as a weapon. Your voice itself has worth. He leaned forward, his intensity focused entirely on me. I need you to understand something. I didn't choose you only because you could help me destroy the Volkovs. I chose you because 15 years ago, your voice saved my life. And I've spent every day since wondering who you were, what happened to the girl who could sing like an angel while probably suffering like a demon. Now I know. And now I have the chance to give you something back. Power, security, a life where you matter. You kidnapped me, I reminded him. That's not giving. That's taking. Is it? He tilted his head, studying me. What did I take that you actually valued? An apartment you could barely afford? A job that was slowly killing you? Debt that would have controlled you forever? I took a life that was slowly destroying you and offered you a different one. Whether you accept it or resist it is your choice. It's not a choice if the alternative is being discarded when I'm no longer useful. Something dark flickered in his expression. I don't discard valuable things, and you, Diana Reeves, are becoming more valuable by the hour. He stood, extending his hand. Come. I want to show you something. I hesitated, but curiosity won over caution. I took his hand, his skin warm, his grip firm but not constraining, and let him pull me to my feet. He led me through more corridors, up another flight of stairs, until we reached a door that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan to open. Beyond was a room that took my breath away. It was a music studio, but unlike any I'd ever seen. Professional-grade equipment, perfect acoustics, a grand piano that gleamed under track lighting, and windows that looked out over the estate's grounds, now visible in the fading evening light. The space was clearly designed with care, every element chosen to create the ideal environment for performance and recording. This is yours, Kane said, watching my reaction. Your sanctuary. When the training becomes too much, when you need to remember who you actually are beneath all the performance. You come here. He moved to the piano, running his fingers across the keys without pressing them. I had it built after I acquired the estate, thinking someday I might find you, might be able to offer you something worthy of your talent. I walked slowly into the space, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of it, the clear evidence that he'd been planning this, planning me, for longer than I wanted to consider. You really have been searching for me for 15 years. I told you. Your voice saved me. Everything I've built, everything I've survived, stems from that moment of hearing beauty in darkness and deciding I wanted to live long enough to find more of it. He met my eyes across the piano. You're not just a tool for revenge, Diana. You're the reason I survived long enough to seek it. The confession was too raw, too honest, revealing a vulnerability that made the dangerous man seem suddenly human. I don't know how to respond to that. You don't have to. Just understand it. He moved toward the door. I'll have dinner sent to your suite. Rest. Tomorrow brings more training. But tonight, if you want to sing, to remind yourself who you are beneath all the performance, this space is yours. He left, and I was alone in a room designed specifically for me by a man who'd spent 15 years searching for someone he'd heard once on a radio. It should have been romantic. Instead, it felt like pressure. The weight of being someone's savior without having agreed to the role, the obligation to live up to an idealized memory, the impossible task of being both weapon and inspiration. I moved to the piano, sat on the bench, let my fingers find middle C. The note rang clear and pure in the perfect acoustics, and without planning to, I began to play, then sing. Not the jazz standards I'd performed the night before, but the song that had apparently saved Cain's life 15 years ago. Ave Maria, gratia plena. The Latin came back easily, muscle memory from childhood, and my voice filled the space with something honest and unguarded. I wasn't performing. I was praying, though to what or whom I wasn't certain. For survival, perhaps. For the strength to become whoever I needed to be. For the wisdom to navigate the impossible situation I'd fallen into. When the final note faded, I sat in silence, my hands still on the keys, and realized with startling clarity that Cain was right about one thing. I had been dying in my old life, slowly suffocating under debt and exhaustion and meaninglessness. This new life might be a cage, but at least it was a cage where I could breathe, where my voice mattered, where someone saw me as more than just another struggling performer invisible to the world. Tomorrow I'd return to training, to transforming into someone who could walk among criminals and smile while gathering their secrets. But tonight, in this beautiful room designed for a ghost Cain had spent half his life searching for, I allowed myself to simply be Diana. Broken, confused, terrified, but somehow still singing. And that, I decided, would have to be enough. The 3 weeks that followed blurred together in an exhausting montage of transformation. Each day began at dawn with Sophia drilling me on etiquette, culture, and the subtle art of appearing to belong among people who'd been born into the world I was faking. Afternoons brought language lessons, a Russian tutor named Dmitri, who frowned at my accent, but grudgingly admitted I had an ear for pronunciation. Evenings were reserved for Cain, who took over my education in ways Sophia couldn't teach. The Volkovs value strength disguised as grace, he explained one night over dinner, always in the formal dining room, always practicing, every meal a test. Dmitri's wife, Katerina, is the true power in their organization. She presents as a cultured socialite, but she's the strategist behind their expansion. If you can win her favor, you'll have access to everything we need. And how do I win her favor? I asked, carefully using the correct fork for my salad. By being what she wishes she could be, artistically talented, genuinely cultured, unburdened by the violence that built her empire. She wants to believe she's a patron of the arts rather than a crime lord's wife. You make that delusion comfortable for her. I was learning that Kane's education was as much about psychology as etiquette. He taught me how to read people, what gestures indicated lies, which conversation topics made people careless, how to ask questions that sounded like innocent interest, but gathered crucial information. He was frighteningly good at it, this dual existence he'd perfected over 15 years. You wear multiple faces too, I observed during one late-night session in his study, where he'd been showing me photographs of various Volkov associates I'd need to recognize. How do you keep track of who you're supposed to be in any given moment? Practice. And remembering that every face serves the same purpose, bringing me closer to destroying them. His expression was grim. The businessman, the philanthropist, the eligible bachelor, they're all masks for the same underlying truth. I'm the son of a murdered man, and I won't rest until I've made his killers pay for every drop of blood they spilled. The intensity of his hatred should have frightened me more than it did. But I'd seen the other side of Kane too. The man who'd built me a music studio, who listened intently when I sang, who sometimes looked at me with something like wonder, as though I were a miracle rather than a tool. Our relationship was complicated, undefined, charged with tension that had nowhere to go. He never touched me inappropriately, never made demands beyond the training, but the air between us crackled with awareness of the power imbalance, of the forced intimacy, of the fact that he'd inserted himself into every aspect of my life, and I'd begun to crave his attention despite knowing I shouldn't. The night before the Volkov Gala, Kane called me to his private office, a room I'd seen only once before, when he'd shown me surveillance footage of the Volkov estate to help me understand the geography. Tonight, the screens showed something different. News footage from 15 years ago, buildings burning, reporters describing the tragic accidents that had killed 17 people, including Antonio Kane and his eldest son. I want you to understand what you're walking into tomorrow, Kane said, his voice tight with controlled emotion. These people murdered my family and made it look like accidents. They destroyed evidence, bought off witnesses, ensured no one would ever be held accountable. And then they took over the territory my father had built, profited from his death, celebrated their victory. The footage changed to more recent images: Dmitry Volkov at charity functions, Katerina Volkov at gallery openings, their 2 adult sons at nightclubs. They looked successful, sophisticated, untouchable. For 15 years, I've been building toward this moment, establishing my own legitimate businesses, gathering intelligence, positioning myself as someone they might eventually do business with. But I've never been able to get close enough to their inner circle, never been able to access the information I need to truly destroy them. He turned from the screens to face me. Until you. The weight of expectation pressed down on my shoulders. And if I fail? If they see through me? Then we adjust and try again. But you won't fail, Diana. He moved closer, his dark eyes intense. I've watched you transform over these 3 weeks. You're not the frightened woman who walked into my home anymore. You've become someone who can hold her own in any room, who commands attention without demanding it, who makes people want to know you better. Sophia says you're ready. I believe her. I don't feel ready. The confession escaped before I could stop it. I feel like I'm about to walk into a lion's den wearing a costume made of meat. A slight smile curved his lips. That's exactly how you should feel. Fear keeps you sharp, makes you careful. Overconfidence gets people killed. He reached out, his fingers brushing my cheek in a gesture that had become almost familiar over our weeks of training. But remember, you're not alone in this. I'll be there tomorrow night. So will Victor and 3 other security personnel positioned throughout the event. You'll have an earpiece disguised as a diamond earring. If anything goes wrong, if you feel unsafe, you say the word Nightingale, and we extract you immediately. Nightingale, I repeated, filing it away as the escape word I hoped I'd never need. The gala begins at 8. Guests arrive between 8 and 9. You'll perform your first set at 9:30, giving time for people to arrive and settle with drinks. Katerina specifically requested a 40-minute set, then a break, then another 40 minutes around 11. He handed me a folder. Your repertoire is in here, the same standards we've practiced, but arranged in an order that builds emotional resonance. Start sultry, move to melancholic, end with something that suggests resilience and strength. Make them feel something real. I opened the folder, scanning the familiar song titles. And during the breaks? Mingle. Let people approach you, and they will. Be charming, but slightly mysterious. Answer questions about your background with the story we've prepared. Listen more than you talk, and most importantly, he paused, his expression growing serious. Watch Katerina. Notice who she talks to, who she avoids, what makes her relax versus what makes her tense. She's the key to everything. That night, I barely slept. I lay in the luxurious bed that had become familiar, staring at the ceiling and running through everything I'd learned. How to hold a wine glass, how to discuss Kandinsky and Rothko, how to laugh at jokes in Russian, how to be Diana Reeves, the jazz vocalist with a mysteriously vague past and an impressive cultural education. Morning brought Teresa with breakfast and a garment bag containing my dress for the evening. A stunning floor-length gown in deep emerald that somehow managed to be both elegant and sensual. The bodice was structured, the neckline modest, but the back was open to the waist, and the fabric clung in ways that suggested rather than revealed. Mr. Kane selected it himself, Teresa said, hanging it carefully in the closet. He has excellent taste. The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sophia appeared for a final review session, drilling me one last time on key facts and appropriate responses. Dmitri called to practice several Russian phrases I might need. Even Victor stopped by, his usually stern expression softening slightly as he handed me a small item. Emergency beacon, he explained. Looks like a lipstick. If something goes very wrong, press the bottom 3 times. Will come in fast and loud. Try not to use it unless absolutely necessary. By 7, I was dressed, my hair styled in an elegant updo that Teresa had spent an hour perfecting. Makeup applied with a skill I'd never possessed, making me look sophisticated and mysterious. Diamond earrings that were actually communication devices sparkled in my ears. The emergency beacon was tucked in my small clutch purse alongside my phone and the lipstick I'd actually use. I stared at myself in the full-length mirror, barely recognizing the woman who looked back. She stood straight, shoulders back, chin level. Everything Sophia had taught me. She looked like she belonged in this emerald gown, like she'd worn designer dresses her entire life. She looked confident, cultured, powerful. She looked like a stranger. Remarkable. Kane's voice from the doorway made me turn. He stood there in a tuxedo that probably cost more than my old apartment's yearly rent, his dark hair perfectly styled, looking every inch the successful businessman he pretended to be. But it was his expression that caught my breath. Something raw and unguarded, almost reverent. You're absolutely stunning. Heat crept up my neck. Teresa and Sophia did good work. No. He moved into the room, circling me slowly, his gaze assessing but not objectifying. They enhanced what was already there. The strength, the grace, the fire that's always lived beneath your exhaustion and fear. He stopped in front of me, his dark eyes meeting mine. You're going to walk into that gala and make every person there want to know you, want to possess you, want to keep you close, and you're going to use that power to help me destroy them. No pressure, I said, trying for levity and not quite succeeding. His smile was slight, but genuine. You can do this, Diana. I wouldn't send you in if I doubted it for even a moment. He pulled a small box from his jacket pocket, opening it to reveal a delicate bracelet, white gold and emeralds that matched my dress. Your mother's jewelry box arrived with your things. I had this made from pieces I found inside, combined with stones that complement the dress, so you'd have her with you tonight. The gesture was so unexpectedly thoughtful, so at odds with the ruthless man planning revenge, that tears threatened to ruin my carefully applied makeup. Kane? Let me, he said softly, taking my wrist and fastening the bracelet with practiced ease. His fingers lingered on my pulse point, and I knew he could feel how my heart raced. Remember who you are beneath all of this. Not the performance, not the training, but the woman who survived impossible odds, who sang through grief, who's stronger than she believes. That woman can do anything. Then the moment broke, and he stepped back, professional distance reasserting itself. The car is ready. Victor will drive us. Remember? We're not together tonight. I'm a potential business associate of Dimitri's, invited to discuss real estate ventures. You're the entertainment, hired through Katerina's art foundation. We acknowledge each other politely if we happen to meet, but we're not connected. Understood? Understood. The drive to the Volkov estate took 45 minutes, winding through increasingly wealthy neighborhoods until we reached gates that made Kane's security look casual. Guards checked our invitation, printed on actual cream-colored cardstock with gold embossing, and waved us through. The house was a mansion in the true sense, sprawling across what must have been acres, lit dramatically to showcase its architecture. Other cars lined the circular drive, uniformed valets parking them with efficient precision. Beautiful people emerged from luxury vehicles, their jewelry catching the light, their laughter carrying across the grounds. Victor dropped me at the entrance designated for performers, a side door where staff checked my credentials against a list before directing me to a staging area. Kane would enter through the main entrance with the other guests. We were in different worlds now, playing our separate roles. The staging area was organized chaos, catering staff rushing through with trays, musicians tuning instruments, someone arguing urgently in Russian on a cell phone. A woman with a clipboard appeared, her expression harried. Diana Reeves? Yes. Good, you're here. This way, quickly. She led me through corridors that were clearly the service sections of the house, functional rather than grand, until we reached a small dressing room. You have 20 minutes. There's water, coffee, tea. The performance space is through that door. Someone will come get you at 9:25. Any questions? Will there be accompaniment? I asked, remembering to sound professional rather than nervous. Recorded tracks, everything you requested. The sound technician has your arrangements. Break a leg. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with my racing heart and the weight of everything riding on the next 3 hours. I used the 20 minutes to center myself, to run through vocal warm-ups, to touch my mother's bracelet for courage. The woman in the mirror looked calm, collected, ready. Inside, I was a mess of anxiety and adrenaline, but Sophia's voice echoed in my head. Find the truth in the lie. You are a talented performer. That part isn't fake. At 9:25, a young man appeared to escort me to the performance space. We moved through more service corridors, then suddenly emerged into the gala proper, and I had to suppress my reaction to the sheer opulence. The room was vast, 2 stories high with a chandelier that looked like it belonged in a palace. Perhaps 100 guests mingled, all dressed in formal wear that probably represented more money than most people saw in a lifetime. Servers circulated with champagne and canapes. A string quartet played softly in one corner. And everywhere, the subtle signs of wealth and power, the way people stood, the quiet certainty in their voices, the invisible hierarchy that determined who spoke to whom. The performance space was a raised platform at one end of the room. Not quite a stage, but elevated enough to be visible. A microphone stood ready, speakers discreetly positioned, the lighting designed to create intimacy within the grand space. I took my position, adjusted the microphone, and scanned the crowd while I waited for the introduction. I spotted Kane almost immediately. He stood with a group of men near the bar, his expression engaged in whatever conversation was happening, but I saw his eyes flick toward me briefly, acknowledging my presence. Then I found Katerina Volkov. She was smaller than I expected, perhaps 50 years old but well-preserved, wearing a gown of deep purple that probably cost more than a car. Her blonde hair was styled in an intricate updo, and diamonds glittered at her throat and wrists. But it was her eyes that caught my attention. Sharp, assessing, missing nothing. She was talking to an older woman, but I saw her gaze shift to me, evaluating. This was the woman I needed to impress. The strategist behind the empire, the key to everything. The string quartet finished their piece, and a man I recognized from Kane's photographs, Dmitry Volkov himself, moved to address the crowd. He was tall, silver-haired, carrying himself with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no in his life. Friends, welcome to our annual gala. As you know, Katerina and I believe in supporting the arts, in bringing culture and beauty into our lives and our city. Tonight, we have a special treat, a vocalist my wife discovered, someone with a rare gift for interpreting the classics with modern sensibility. Please welcome Diana Reeves. Polite applause rippled through the crowd as he stepped away, and the lights shifted, dimming everywhere except the performance space. I felt 100 pairs of eyes focus on me, assessing, judging, deciding whether I was worth their attention. And then I began to sing. I'd chosen Cry Me a River as my opening. Sultry, defiant. A song about power and revenge disguised as a love song. My voice filled the perfect acoustics of the room, and I watched as conversation stopped, as people turned toward me, as even the servers paused in their circulation. This was what I did. This was the one thing I knew with absolute certainty I could do well. Everything else might be performance and deception, but my voice was real. I moved through my set with growing confidence, reading the room, adjusting my energy to what they needed. Summertime brought nostalgic sighs. At last, made couples move closer together. Strange fruit created uncomfortable silence followed by explosive applause, the discomfort somehow making the appreciation deeper. Between songs, I made eye contact with audience members, smiled in ways that invited connection without being inappropriate. Let them see the artist rather than just hearing the voice. I watched Katerina, who'd moved closer to the performance space, her expression shifting from polite interest to genuine engagement. When the 40-minute set ended, the applause was enthusiastic, several people calling for encores that I smiled and declined, better to leave them wanting more. As the house lights came back up and conversation resumed, I stepped down from the platform, intending to retreat to the dressing room for my break. But Katerina intercepted me, her approach purposeful. Miss Reeves. Her English carried only a slight accent, cultured and precise. That was extraordinary, truly. Your interpretation of strange fruit was... She paused, searching for words. Haunting. Brave. Most performers choose easier material for events like this. Thank you, Mrs. Volkov. I kept my tone warm but respectful, channeling Sophia's lessons about the right balance of confidence and deference. I believe audiences respond to honesty, even when it's uncomfortable. Indeed. She studied me with those sharp eyes. Where did you train? Your bio was frustratingly vague. This was it. The first real test of the cover story Kane and Sophia had built. I'm largely self-taught, actually. I grew up in the church, learned by listening to recordings of the masters. Billie Holiday, Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan. When I was old enough, I studied briefly at the New England Conservatory, but I found the formal structure limiting. I learned better by feeling the music than by analyzing it technically. It was a good story because it mixed truth and lies seamlessly. I had grown up in church. I had learned by listening, The self-taught part was real. Only the conservatory was fiction, but it explained any gaps in formal musical education while still suggesting I was cultured enough to have attended a prestigious institution. "A purist," Katerina said, something like approval in her voice. "I appreciate that. Too many artists today are all technique and no soul. You have both." She gestured to a server, who immediately appeared with champagne. "Join me for a few minutes? I'd love to hear more about your approach to interpretation." This was exactly what Kane wanted: access to Katerina, time to observe and engage. But as I accepted the champagne and followed her to a quieter corner of the room, I felt the weight of what I was really doing. This woman had ordered deaths, had built an empire on violence and exploitation, had helped murder Kane's family. And I was smiling at her like she was a potential patron instead of a monster. "Find the truth in the lie," I reminded myself. "You are an artist. That part is real." We talked about music, about the challenges of authentic interpretation, about the artists who'd influenced me. Katerina was genuinely knowledgeable, asking intelligent questions that suggested real interest rather than polite conversation. She introduced me to several other guests: a gallery owner, a symphony conductor, a wealthy collector who funded emerging artists. Through it all, I maintained the role Sophia had trained me for. Charming but not obsequious, cultured but not pretentious, mysterious enough to be interesting without being suspicious. And I watched, noting everything Kane would want to know. Katerina touched her phone obsessively, checking messages every few minutes with barely concealed anxiety. She drank more than social convention suggested. Her glass refilled by attentive servers 3 times in 20 minutes. When a particular man approached, someone Kane's briefing had identified as Viktor Sokolov, the Volkov's head of security, her entire demeanor changed, becoming colder, more guarded. "Excuse me," she said to me, her smile tight. "I need to address something. Please, enjoy the party. You'll perform again at 11? "Of course." She swept away with Victor, their heads bent together in urgent conversation. I watched them disappear through a side door, noting the direction, the tension in their body language. That's important, I thought. Kane needs to know about that. I mingled for the next half hour, letting people approach me, accepting compliments, deflecting questions about my personal life with practiced vagueness. Several men flirted, which I handled with the polite distance Sophia had taught me. One woman asked about booking me for a private event, and I gave her a card. Another piece of the elaborate fiction Kane had constructed, complete with a working phone number and email that his people monitored. Then I spotted Kane. He was in conversation with Dmitry Volkov himself, the 2 men standing near the bar, their body language suggesting business discussion rather than social chat. As I watched, Kane laughed at something Dmitry said, his whole demeanor relaxed and friendly, the perfect mask hiding the hatred beneath. Our eyes met across the room for just a second, and he gave me the slightest nod. Approval. I was doing well. The second set began at 11, as scheduled. This time I noticed people had positioned themselves with better views of the performance space, anticipating what was coming. Katerina had returned, though she looked slightly stressed, her earlier relaxation replaced by tension. I opened with something upbeat. Fever, to re-engage the energy, then gradually moved toward more emotional material. I watched Katerina as I sang "Cry Me a River," saw her eyes glisten with what might have been tears, and understood something important. Beneath the crime boss's wife was a woman who responded to genuine emotion, who craved beauty and meaning beyond the violence that defined her world. She's the vulnerability in their armor, I realized. The one who might actually have a conscience to appeal to. For my final song, I chose something Kane and I had debated. I Put a Spell on You, the Nina Simone version, raw and powerful and dangerous. It was a risk, too sensual for some audiences, too intense. But I watched Katerina as I sang, pouring everything into the performance, Not just the sexuality, but the desperation underneath. The need to be seen and valued and kept. The room was absolutely silent when I finished. That perfect moment of suspension before applause breaks. And in that silence, I saw Katerina's expression, transfixed, moved, hungry for whatever truth she thought I was offering. Then the applause came, louder than before, and I knew I'd won. The rest of the evening blurred together. More conversation, more compliments, Katerina insisting I attend a smaller salon she was hosting next month, Dmitri himself stopping by to say my performance had been the highlight of the evening. I collected observations, noted details, played my role perfectly. By 1 a.m., guests were departing, and I was finally released. The woman with the clipboard thanked me profusely, handed me an envelope with cash payment, and said Mrs. Volkov would be in touch about future performances. Victor was waiting in the service entrance, his expression revealing nothing as he escorted me to the car. Kane was already inside, his tuxedo jacket discarded, his tie loosened. As soon as the door closed behind us and Victor started driving, Kane turned to me, his eyes blazing with intensity. "Tell me everything." I did, recounting every conversation, every observation, Katerina's anxiety and phone checking, her private conversation with Victor, the way she'd responded to my performance. Kane listened without interrupting, his expression growing more focused with each detail. "You were perfect," he said finally. "Better than perfect. She's already mentioned you to 2 other people in my hearing, calling you her discovery, planning to bring you into her inner circle." His hand found mine in the darkness of the car, his fingers lacing through mine in a gesture that felt more intimate than it should. "I knew you could do this." The warmth in his voice, the pride, made something complicated twist in my chest. I should have been horrified by what I'd done. Infiltrated these people's lives, laid the groundwork for their destruction, pretended to be something I wasn't. But instead, I felt exhilarated, powerful, alive in ways I hadn't been in years. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we wait for Katerina's invitation to the salon. It's more exclusive than the gala, 20 people maximum, usually in their private residence rather than the public spaces. If you're invited there, you'll have access to areas we've never been able to penetrate." His grip on my hand tightened. "You did it, Diana. You've opened the door. Now we just need to walk through it." I leaned my head back against the seat, exhaustion finally catching up with adrenaline. Kane's hand was still in mine, his thumb tracing circles on my palm in a gesture that had become familiar during our weeks together. Comfort and possession intertwined. "I saw you talking to Dmitri," I said, my eyes closed. "What did he want?" "To discuss a real estate venture. Legitimate business, but it gives me a reason to be in his orbit more frequently. By the time we're done, he'll consider me a friend." The darkness in Kane's voice made it clear what he thought of that friendship. And friends are so much easier to destroy than enemies. They never see it coming. The car ride back to Kane's estate passed in silence, both of us processing what had happened. I'd crossed a line tonight, moved from unwilling captive to active participant in Kane's revenge. The rationalization that I'd had no choice was becoming harder to maintain. Because the truth was, somewhere between learning to hold a wine glass properly and watching Katerina's face as I sang about spells and possession, I'd stopped doing this because I had to. I'd started doing it because I wanted to. And that realization was more terrifying than anything else that had happened. The invitation to Katerina's salon arrived 3 days later, a hand-delivered envelope on cream stock, her personal letterhead embossed in gold. The event was scheduled for the following Saturday at the Volkovs' private residence, 15 guests maximum, an intimate evening of music and conversation. "I would be honored if you would perform," she'd written in elegant script. "Your voice has haunted me since the gala. Please say yes." Kane read the invitation over my shoulder as I stood in the music studio, his expression triumphant. "This is it. Their private residence means family quarters, personal offices, the spaces where they actually live and conduct real business. If we're going to find the evidence I need to destroy them, it will be there. What evidence? I asked, turning to face him. In the weeks since the gala, our dynamic had shifted in ways I was still trying to understand. We'd grown closer, the forced intimacy of training evolving into something that felt almost like partnership. He touched me more frequently. Casual gestures that lingered, fingers brushing mine when handing me papers, his hand at the small of my back when guiding me through doorways. Nothing inappropriate, but charged with awareness we both felt and neither acknowledged. Financial records, communication with their contacts, anything that connects them definitively to criminal activity in ways the police can't ignore or be paid to overlook. His jaw tightened. I don't just want them dead, Diana. I want them destroyed. Reputation, empire, legacy. I want the world to know what they really are. That's not revenge. That's justice. The distinction felt important somehow. Justice would have been my father dying of old age surrounded by family. Justice would have been my brother raising his children, my mother seeing her grandchildren. His voice was hard, controlled fury simmering beneath. What I'm doing is revenge disguised as justice. Don't romanticize it. But wasn't that exactly what I'd been doing? Romanticizing Cain's vendetta, making it noble in my mind to justify my participation. The uncomfortable truth was that I'd become complicit not just in infiltration, but in whatever would follow. I'd crossed from victim to accomplice, and the line behind me was blurring. The salon was even more exclusive than the gala, held in the Volkovs' actual living quarters rather than their public event spaces. I arrived at 7, dressed in a midnight blue gown that Cain had selected, my hair styled simply, my makeup understated. The effect was elegant but approachable, artistic rather than polished. Katerina greeted me personally at a side entrance, embracing me like we were old friends rather than recent acquaintances. Diana, I'm so glad you could come. Tonight is special. Just close friends, intimate conversation, beautiful music. You'll love these people. She led me through corridors I hadn't seen during the gala. Narrower, more personal, lined with family photographs and artwork that was clearly chosen for emotional value rather than investment. I cataloged everything, knowing Cain would want details. The salon was held in what appeared to be a private sitting room, smaller than the gala space but more luxurious. Perhaps 15 people were already present, talking in small groups, drinks in hand. These weren't business associates or social contacts. These were people the Volkovs actually knew, actually trusted. I recognized several faces from Cain's briefings. Viktor Sokolov, their head of security, now in a suit rather than his usual tactical gear. Dmitri's younger brother Alexei, who managed their shipping operations. A woman Cain had identified as their accountant, Anna Kravchenko. And others whose names and roles I'd memorized. The inner circle, the people who knew where the bodies were buried, sometimes literally. Katerina introduced me around, presenting me not as hired entertainment, but as a remarkable artist I'm supporting. The distinction was important. It positioned me as someone worth knowing, rather than someone serving them. Several people had questions about my background, my training, my future plans. I delivered the carefully constructed answers Sophia had prepared, mixing truth and fiction so seamlessly that I almost believed it myself. The performance space was intimate. Just me, a microphone, and a piano in the corner that a young man was playing soft background music on between my sets. Katerina had requested 2 40-minute sets again, with a long break between for conversation and dinner. I sang differently here than at the gala. More personal, more vulnerable, choosing songs that felt like confessions. The nearness of you. I'll be seeing you. Stormy weather. Songs about longing and loss and the desperate need for connection. I watched Katerina as I sang, saw her wiping her eyes during "Someone to Watch Over Me," and understood that I'd found the key to her. She was desperately lonely, despite being surrounded by people, craving authentic emotion in a life built on deception. During the break, dinner was served. Not the formal seated affair of the gala, but a casual buffet where people mingled freely. I found myself in conversation with Anna, the accountant, who was surprisingly warm and chatty after several glasses of wine. "Katerina talks about you constantly," she said, her Russian accent thick. "Says you remind her of someone she used to know before she married Dmitri, someone who loved music more than money." "What happened to that person?" I asked carefully. Anna's expression grew sad. She made choices. We all make choices. Sometimes we choose security over passion, power over peace, and then we spend the rest of our lives wondering what might have been different. The words felt weighted with meaning I didn't quite understand. Before I could probe further, Katerina appeared, linking her arm through mine in a gesture of casual affection. "Come, let me show you something. Just for a moment before your second set." She led me away from the salon, down a hallway to a door that required a fingerprint scan to open. Beyond was what appeared to be her private study. A smaller room lined with bookshelves, a desk covered in papers, and walls decorated with photographs. Family photos mostly, but also candid shots that looked decades old. "This was me," Katerina said, pointing to a photograph of a young woman, maybe 20, standing beside a piano, her expression radiant with joy. "Before I met Dmitri, I was studying music at the conservatory in Moscow. I was going to be a concert pianist, can you imagine? I had talent, everyone said so. I had dreams." "What changed?" I asked, though I could guess. "I met Dmitri. He was so handsome, so powerful, so certain that he could give me everything I wanted. And he has. This house, this life, security I never imagined growing up in Soviet Russia." She turned from the photograph, her eyes meeting mine. "But I never played again. Not seriously. It was too painful to do something I loved knowing I'd given up the chance to truly pursue it." This was the vulnerability Kane needed me to exploit. The crack in her armor where authentic emotion lived. I should have pressed the advantage, should have deepened our connection to further his goals. Instead, I found myself speaking an uncomfortable truth. It's not too late. You could still play, still study. Talent doesn't disappear just because you choose a different path. Katerina smiled, sad and knowing. "You're kind to say so, but some choices can't be unmade. Some paths, once abandoned, grow too overgrown to find again." She touched my arm gently. "Don't make my mistakes, Diana. Whatever you do with your talent, don't let anyone make you choose between your art and your life. Find a way to have both." The advice was so genuine, so achingly human, that guilt twisted through me. This woman who'd ordered deaths, who'd built an empire on violence, was giving me life advice like a concerned mentor. The cognitive dissonance was staggering. As we returned to the salon for my second set, I felt the weight of what I was doing more acutely than ever before. These weren't just names in Kane's vendetta, faceless criminals deserving destruction. They were people, complicated, contradictory, capable of both terrible violence and genuine emotion. But then I remembered the footage Kane had shown me, the buildings burning, the 17 people who'd died. Kane at 17, watching his family's empire burn. And I remembered that people capable of beauty were also capable of horror. That complexity didn't erase culpability. They murdered his family, I reminded myself. Whatever humanity they show me now doesn't change what they did then. The second set was my best performance yet. I poured everything into it, the confusion, the guilt, the strange attraction I felt to Kane despite knowing I shouldn't, the grief I still carried for my mother, the desperate hope that somehow all of this would lead to something meaningful, rather than just more destruction. The songs became vessels for emotions I couldn't otherwise express, and the small audience responded with rapt attention. When I finished, Katerina embraced me tightly, whispering, "Thank you," against my hair, like I'd given her a gift, instead of potentially setting her up for ruin. Others approached with similar warmth, several pressing business cards into my hands and insisting I perform at their events. But it was Victor, the security chief, whose attention concerned me most. He'd watched my entire second set with an expression I couldn't quite read, not appreciation or enjoyment, but assessment. When he approached as I was gathering my things, preparing to leave, I felt my heart rate spike. "Miss Reeves." His English was accented but clear, his voice flat and professional. "A moment?" "Of course." I kept my expression open, friendly, hiding the terror beneath. "You're very talented. Katerina is right to support you." He paused, his pale eyes studying me with uncomfortable intensity. "But I wonder, where exactly did you say you studied?" This was the test I'd been dreading. Victor hadn't been particularly interested during our introduction, but clearly something had triggered his suspicion. The New England Conservatory, though briefly, I found formal structure limiting. "Interesting. My niece attends there currently. Perhaps you knew her. Marina Sokolov, vocal performance." The trap was obvious. If I claimed to know her and didn't, or if I claimed not to know her and should have, I'd be exposed. I was only there for one semester, several years ago. There were many students. I'm sorry, I don't recall the name. Of course, it's a large school. But his eyes said he wasn't satisfied. "You have a unique voice, very distinctive. I'm surprised we haven't heard of you before now." "I've mostly performed in smaller venues, jazz clubs, private events. I prefer intimate settings." My smile stayed in place, but my palms were sweating. Fame has never interested me as much as connection with the audience. A noble sentiment. He nodded once, dismissing me, but I felt his gaze follow as I left the room. Victor was waiting where he'd dropped me off, his expression neutral as always. I climbed into the car on shaking legs, trying to maintain composure until we were safely away from the Volkov residence. "Problem?" Victor asked, noticing my tension. "Their security chief is suspicious, Victor Sokolov. He was testing me, asking questions about my background that felt like a trap. I'll inform Mr. Kane. He'll want to prepare for the possibility that they're investigating you." The drive back felt endless, anxiety mounting with each mile. If the Volkovs discovered the truth about who I really was, who Kane really was, the consequences would be catastrophic. This wasn't a game. These were people who made problems disappear permanently. Kane was waiting in his study when I arrived, still dressed in the jeans and sweater he'd worn earlier, apparently having worked late. His expression shifted from anticipation to concern when he saw my face. "What happened?" I told him about Victor's questions, about the feeling of being assessed rather than entertained. Kane listened without interrupting, his jaw tightening progressively. "He suspects something," Kane said finally. "Not necessarily the truth, but he knows something is off. Victor didn't survive this long in his position by being trusting." He stood, pacing, his mind clearly racing through possibilities. "We need to make your background more solid. I'll have documents created, enrollment records at the conservatory, performance history, references that check out if anyone digs, and we need to be prepared for the possibility that they'll try to investigate you directly." "What does that mean?" "It means they might follow you, might try to access your apartment, might approach people from your past." His expression grew dark. "It means we need to be perfect from here on out. One mistake, one inconsistency, and we're both dead." The bluntness of it, "we're both dead," made the reality of what we were doing impossible to ignore. This wasn't a sophisticated game or a romanticized revenge plot. It was genuinely dangerous, and I'd walked into it with my eyes barely open. I should stop, I said, even though we both knew I wouldn't. Before this gets worse. You can't stop now. Victor's suspicion doesn't mean he knows anything. It just means he's careful. If you suddenly disappear after his questions, that confirms his concerns. Kane moved to where I stood, his hands settling on my shoulders, his dark eyes intense. You have to continue, have to be so perfect that his suspicions seem like paranoia, and I have to accelerate my timeline. The longer this plays out, the more opportunities for exposure. Accelerate how? The evidence I need is in Dimitri's private office, Kane continued, his hands still on my shoulders, grounding and possessive simultaneously. Financial records, communication logs, documentation of transactions that connect them definitively to their criminal operations. I've been planning to access it for months, but I needed a reason to be in their private residence, needed the layout, security details, patterns of movement. His expression intensified. You've given me all of that. Katerina's salon was in their family wing. You saw the security protocols, the fingerprint scanner, the camera placements. That information is invaluable. Understanding dawned, cold and terrible. You want me to help you break into Dimitri's office? Not break in. That would be too obvious. But your growing relationship with Katerina gives us options. If she invites you for a private lunch or a one-on-one meeting, if you can find a reason to be there when security is lighter, when Dimitri is away on business. He trailed off, letting me fill in the implications. You want me to plant something, or steal something, or disable security. The reality of active espionage, of moving from passive observation to active sabotage, made my stomach clench. That's completely different from performing and making conversation. I know, and I wouldn't ask if there were another option. But Victor's suspicion means we're on borrowed time. Either we act soon, or we abandon everything we've built. His hands tightened on my shoulders, not painfully, but urgently. I've spent 15 years planning this, Diana. 15 years of building my own empire, gathering resources, positioning myself. You're the final piece, the one element I needed and couldn't manufacture. Please don't tell me we're stopping when we're this close. The raw desperation in his voice was more effective than any threat could have been. This wasn't just revenge for Kane. It was the defining purpose of his entire adult life. Everything he'd built, everything he'd become, was in service of destroying the people who'd murdered his family. And I'd become so entangled in his mission that I couldn't imagine walking away from it. What exactly would I need to do? I asked, the question itself an acknowledgement that I'd already decided. Relief flashed across his face. First, you continue building your relationship with Katerina. Accept any invitation she offers. Make yourself indispensable to her emotionally. You've already started. She sees you as someone who understands her in ways others don't. Deepen that connection. Make her trust you completely. And then we wait for an opportunity. Katerina mentioned future performances, possibly regular engagements at smaller events. Eventually, she'll invite you during a time when Dimitri is traveling, when the house is less secured. When that happens, you'll need to access his office, even for just a few minutes, long enough to insert a device that will copy everything on his computer and transmit it to us remotely. He pulled a small object from his pocket, something that looked like an ordinary USB drive, but was presumably much more sophisticated. This does everything automatically. You just need to plug it into any USB port on his computer, wait 60 seconds for it to initialize, then remove it. The copying process continues remotely after that, completely undetectable. I took the device, its weight insignificant compared to what it represented. And if I get caught? You won't. His confidence would have been reassuring if it weren't so absolute, so blind to the 1,000 things that could go wrong. But if something unexpected happens, if you feel unsafe, you have the emergency beacon. You say Nightingale, or you press the lipstick device 3 times, and we extract you immediately. My team can be inside that house in under 3 minutes from various positions we've established nearby. 3 minutes is a long time when someone is pointing a gun at you. It won't come to that. You're too valuable to them now. Katerina's protege, an artist she's invested in emotionally. Even if Victor is suspicious, he won't act without proof, and we're not going to give him any. Kane's thumb traced my jaw, the touch electric and distracting. Trust me, Diana. I've kept you safe so far, haven't I? Safe was a relative term. He'd imprisoned me, completely upended my life, made me complicit in dangerous criminal activity. But he'd also given me security I'd never known, purpose I'd never felt, and a strange sense of belonging that I couldn't quite name. You've kept me alive, I corrected. Safe is debatable. His smile was slight, but genuine. Fair distinction. I promise to continue keeping you alive then. And when this is over, when the Volkovs are destroyed and my family is avenged, you'll have your freedom. Complete freedom. No debt, no obligation, enough money to pursue whatever you want. You can disappear, start over anywhere you choose, be whoever you want to be. The offer should have been appealing. Instead, it sent an unexpected ache through my chest. Freedom from Kane meant leaving behind the strange life we'd built together, the partnership that had formed from captivity and shared purpose. It meant returning to being invisible, to mattering to no one. What if I don't want to disappear? The question escaped before I could stop it, revealing more than I'd intended. Something shifted in Kane's expression. Surprise, followed by heat that made my breath catch. Then you don't have to. You could stay. Not as a prisoner or a tool, but as... He paused, seeming to search for the right word. As whatever you wanted to be. Partner, companion. The woman whose voice saved my life and then helped me reclaim it. The air between us felt charged, dangerous, full of possibility and terrible consequences. We danced around this attraction for weeks, the forced intimacy creating something neither of us had intended. But acknowledging it, giving it form and words, would change everything. We shouldn't, I whispered, even as I swayed toward him. No, we shouldn't. But his hand was in my hair, tilting my face up to his. We shouldn't mix business with whatever this is. Shouldn't complicate an already impossible situation. Shouldn't risk everything we've built on something as volatile as desire. But I've wanted you since the moment you walked into my home and sang like you were confessing sins. And I'm tired of pretending otherwise. His mouth met mine before I could respond, before I could talk myself out of what we both knew was a terrible idea. The kiss was nothing like I'd imagined. Not gentle or tentative, but consuming. Desperate. Full of weeks of suppressed tension finally released. His hands were everywhere, my back, my waist, tangling in my hair, and I responded with equal hunger, pulling him closer, needing the contact, needing the confirmation that this pull between us wasn't one-sided. We broke apart, breathing hard, his forehead resting against mine, both of us trembling with the magnitude of the line we'd just crossed. This is a mistake, I said, not moving away. Probably. His thumb traced my swollen lips. Add it to all the others we've made together. Kane. Dominic. His name on his lips sounded intimate, vulnerable. If we're doing this, if we're acknowledging what's been building, you call me Dominic. Dominic, I repeated, tasting the name. This complicates everything. Everything was already complicated. He kissed me again. Softer this time, but no less intense. This just makes it honest. We stayed like that for a long moment, tangled together, breathing each other's air, balanced on the edge of something that would either save us both or destroy us completely. Finally, he pulled back, his expression conflicted. You should rest. Tomorrow we start preparing for the next phase. You'll need to be perfect. He brushed hair from my face, the gesture tender, despite the dangerous conversation we'd just had. And Diana? Whatever happens with the Volkovs, whatever you decide about after, I meant what I said. You're not a tool to me anymore. You haven't been for a while. Then he left, leaving me alone in his study, lips bruised and mind spinning, trying to understand how I'd gone from captive to accomplice, to something that felt terrifyingly close to lover. The next 3 weeks passed in a blur of preparation and deepening connections. Katerina invited me for lunch, just the two of us in her private rooms, security lighter with Dmitri traveling to Moscow on business. We talked about music, about the paths not taken, about the sacrifices women make for security and love. She played piano for me, her talent rusty but still evident, and I sang accompaniment, creating impromptu duets that made her laugh with pure joy. This is what I missed, she said, her fingers still on the keys. This feeling of creating something beautiful with someone who understands. Dmitri supports my foundation, but he doesn't truly understand why art matters. He sees it as investment or status. You see it as I do, as necessary, as soul food. I'd nodded, feeling the weight of guilt and purpose tangling together. Because I did understand her, did see the genuine emotion beneath the crime boss's wife. But I was also using that understanding to betray her, to help the man I'd fallen for destroy everything she'd built. Victor remained suspicious. I could feel his eyes on me during subsequent events, could sense his investigation continuing in the background. But Kane's team had done their work, creating a false trail of performances and references that checked out if anyone looked, ensuring that Diana Reeves existed on paper as solidly as she did in person. And through it all, Dominic and I grew closer. Stolen moments between training sessions, kisses in the music studio after I'd finished practicing, late nights in his study where we talked about everything except what was coming. He told me about his childhood, the pressure of being Antonio Kane's son, the expectations he'd carried. I told him about my mother's illness, the slow erosion of hope, the moment I'd realized I was completely alone in the world. You're not alone anymore, he'd said, pulling me into his arms. Whatever else I've done wrong, I've given you that. You matter to me, Diana. More than the revenge, more than the plan. You. I wanted to believe him. Desperately. But I couldn't forget that our relationship had been built on force and manipulation, that every intimate moment was shadowed by the knowledge that I'd had no choice in how we'd started, even if I was choosing to continue. The opportunity finally came on a Thursday afternoon. Katerina called, her voice bright with excitement. Diana, are you free tomorrow evening? I'm having a few friends for an intimate dinner. Very small, very casual. Dmitri is in St. Petersburg until Saturday, and I've been dying for a real conversation instead of the formal nonsense we usually host. Say you'll come, please? I'd be honored, I said, catching Dominic's eye across his study where I'd been working on correspondence. His expression sharpened, understanding immediately. After I hung up, he pulled me close, his lips finding my temple. This is it. Dmitri gone, small dinner, Katerina relaxed. You'll have access to areas you haven't seen before. His office is on the second floor of the East Wing. I've marked it on the map we've been building. Third door on the left after the staircase. What if I can't get away from the group? You will. Katerina's intimate dinners involve wine and long conversations. At some point, she'll give you a tour. She loves showing off the house to people she trusts. When she does, find a reason to separate. Say you need to use the restroom and got turned around. Give yourself 2 minutes maximum in the office. 2 minutes to potentially change everything. 2 minutes to betray a woman who'd shown me genuine kindness and vulnerability. 2 minutes to help the man I loved destroy his family's murderers. The dinner was exactly as Katerina had described. 8 people, including myself, gathered in a private dining room I hadn't seen before. The food was excellent. The wine flowed freely. The conversation was surprisingly genuine. I found myself actually enjoying it, even knowing what I was really there to do. Afterward, as we moved to a sitting room for coffee and dessert, Katerina linked her arm through mine. "Let me show you something. I've been redecorating one of the guest suites, and I'd love your opinion on the color scheme." This was it, the opportunity Dominic had predicted. We climbed the grand staircase, Katerina chattering about wallpaper and fabric choices, her words slightly slurred from wine. The second floor was quieter, more private, illuminated by soft sconces rather than the bright chandeliers of the public spaces. "It's just down here," she said, leading me down the East Wing corridor. "I know you have an artist's eye. I value your opinion more than the decorators, honestly." We passed the third door on the left, Dimitri's office, exactly where Dominic had said it would be. My heart hammered as Katerina opened the fourth door, revealing a beautiful suite done in shades of blue and cream. "What do you think? Is the blue too bold? My decorator says it's sophisticated, but I worry it's cold." "It's beautiful," I said automatically, barely seeing the room. Though perhaps warmer lighting would make it feel more intimate. "Yes, that's exactly what I thought." She beamed, clearly pleased to have her instincts validated. "There's a bathroom through there if you want to see how the tile turned out. I'll be right back. I want to grab fabric samples from my office to show you." She left, and I had perhaps 2 minutes before she'd expect me back. I counted to 10 to ensure she'd gone far enough, then slipped into the hallway, moving quickly toward Dimitri's office. The door was unlocked, an arrogance born of believing his home was completely secure. Inside, the office was exactly what I'd expected. Dark wood, leather furniture, the trappings of power. A massive desk dominated the space, computer monitors dark but clearly active, the machine humming softly. I pulled the USB device from where I'd hidden it in my bra, my hands shaking as I searched for a port. There, on the side of the main computer tower. I inserted the device, watching as a small light began to blink, initializing, copying, transmitting. 60 seconds, Dominic had said. I counted in my head, watching the door, every sound amplified by adrenaline. 45 seconds. 50. 55. "Diana?" Katerina's voice, closer than expected. She was coming back. 60 seconds. I yanked the device out, pocketing it, and moved quickly toward the door. But I wasn't fast enough. Katerina appeared in the hallway, her expression shifting from friendly to confused as she registered where I was. "What are you doing in Dimitri's office?" My mind raced, searching for plausible explanation. "I'm so sorry. I got turned around looking for the bathroom. I opened the wrong door and was just realizing my mistake." Her eyes narrowed slightly, suspicion warring with our friendship. "The bathroom is in the opposite direction." "I know. I'm terrible with directions. Everything looks so similar in these hallways." I laughed, aiming for sheepish rather than guilty. "I promise I wasn't snooping. I know how that must look." For a long, terrible moment she studied me, and I saw her weighing possibilities, calculating odds. Then her expression softened, and she linked her arm through mine again, guiding me firmly away from Dimitri's office. "Come, let me show you where the bathroom actually is. And Diana?" Her voice carried a warning beneath the warmth. "Dimitri is very particular about his private spaces. Even I rarely enter his office without permission. Best not to mention this little mistake to anyone, yes?" "Of course, I'm mortified." She squeezed my arm. "Don't be. We all get lost sometimes. That's what friends are for, helping us find our way back. But I caught the way her eyes lingered on me for the rest of the evening, the slight reserve that hadn't been there before. I'd miscalculated, moved too quickly, aroused suspicion I might not be able to dispel. When Victor finally came to collect me, I maintained my composure until we were safely away from the Volkov estate. Then I slumped in my seat, adrenaline crashing, the full magnitude of what I'd risked settling over me. "Did you get it?" Victor asked, his eyes meeting mine in the rearview mirror. I pulled the device from my pocket, holding it up. "Yes." But Katerina caught me coming out of Dimitri's office. I played it off as getting lost, but I don't think she fully believed me. "Mr. Kane will want to know immediately." Dominic was waiting in his study, pacing, his expression tense. When I entered, he crossed to me in 3 strides, pulling me into his arms before I could even speak. "Are you all right?" Victor said there was a problem. I told him everything, watching his expression shift from relief to concern as I described Katerina's suspicion. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment, his jaw tight. "This accelerates everything. If Katerina tells Victor about finding you near Dimitri's office, he'll investigate further. We need to move fast, extract the data, analyze it, and act before they realize what we've taken." "What does acting mean?" I asked, though I feared I knew. "It means I present the evidence to the authorities I trust, the few who aren't on the Volkov payroll. It means simultaneous raids on their properties, arrests, seizures of assets. It means the end of their empire." His hands framed my face, his dark eyes intense. "And it means you disappear before any of it happens. I won't risk them connecting you to the intelligence leak. Once we have what we need from the data, you're gone. New identity, new life, somewhere they can never find you." The plan was sound, logical, necessary, but it meant leaving Dominic, leaving the strange life we'd built together, returning to invisibility after briefly mattering to someone. "What about you?" I asked. "Won't they suspect you too?" "Let them. I'll have alibis, legitimate reasons for any contact I've had with them. And more importantly, I'll have the satisfaction of watching everything they built collapse." His smile was cold, vengeful, the mask he wore slipping to reveal the damaged man beneath. "This is what I've worked toward for 15 years. Nothing else matters." "I matter," I wanted to say. "We matter." But the words stuck in my throat because I wasn't sure they were true. Wasn't sure if what we'd built could survive outside the pressure cooker of revenge and shared purpose. The next 48 hours were tense, waiting for Dominic's tech specialist to extract and analyze the data. I remained in the estate, not performing, not going anywhere, while Dominic's team worked around the clock to build the case that would destroy the Volkovs. On Saturday evening, Dominic appeared in the music studio where I'd been hiding, his expression triumphant and terrible. "We have everything. Financial records showing money laundering through 15 shell corporations, communication logs connecting them to 3 murders, including my father and brother, documented bribes to police officials, judges, politicians. Enough evidence that even their bought protection can't save them. So it's over." The words should have brought relief. Instead, I felt hollow. Almost. He crossed to where I sat at the piano, pulling me to my feet. "The raids happen Monday morning. By Monday night, Dimitri and Katerina will be in federal custody, their assets frozen, their empire dismantled. Everything they built, everything they stole from my family, gone. And me? You disappear tomorrow. Victor will drive you to a private airport. From there, a plane to Vancouver, then connection to wherever you want to go. New passport, new identity, enough money to start over completely. You'll be free, Diana, truly free." I should have been grateful. He was giving me everything he'd promised. Freedom, security, a fresh start. But all I could think about was that fresh start, meaning leaving him. Leaving the music studio he'd built for me. Leaving the strange partnership we'd forged from impossible circumstances. "Come with me," I said impulsively. "Once the Volkovs are destroyed, once you have your revenge, come with me. We could actually have a life together. Something real instead of this." Pain flashed across his face. "I can't. There are others. Associates of the Volkovs. Rivals who'll try to claim their territory. Loose ends that need tying up. The destruction doesn't end with Dmitri and Katerina. It's just beginning. So, revenge is all there is for you. Nothing else matters." "That's not fair." His voice hardened. "You knew what this was from the start. I've been honest about my purpose, about what drives me. Don't ask me to abandon 15 years of planning because we developed feelings in the process." Feelings. I laughed bitterly. Is that what we're calling this? The twisted connection between captor and captive? The Stockholm Syndrome masquerading as partnership? You're more than that to me. You know you are. Then prove it. Choose me over revenge. Choose life over destruction. Choose something other than the hate that's defined you since you were 17. We stared at each other across the piano, the ultimatum hanging between us. Impossible, unfair, but necessary. Because I'd realized something in that moment. I couldn't live with being second to his vendetta. Couldn't build a future with a man whose entire identity was wrapped up in destroying his past. "I can't," he said finally, the words heavy with regret. "I'm sorry, Diana, but I can't." And that was the answer I'd needed, even if it broke something inside me to hear it. In Sunday morning came too quickly. Victor appeared with documents, passport, driver's license, birth certificate, all bearing a name that wasn't mine. Sarah Mitchell, born in Portland, Oregon, 30 years old. A complete identity, ready to wear like a costume. I packed the few personal items I wanted to keep. My mother's bracelet, the photo album Victor had retrieved from my apartment, the jewelry box with its carved roses. Everything else could stay. Could be part of the life I was leaving behind. Dominic was in his study when I came to say goodbye. He looked like he hadn't slept, his dark hair disheveled, his expression haggard. "This is what you wanted," I said from the doorway. "Everything you've worked for coming to fruition. You should be celebrating." "How can I celebrate when it means losing you?" The raw honesty in his voice nearly broke my resolve. "You made your choice." "So did you. You're leaving." "What else can I do? Stay here and watch you destroy yourself with revenge? Become complicit in whatever comes next? I've already compromised everything I thought I believed in for you. I can't keep doing it." He crossed to me, his hands finding my face, his forehead resting against mine. "I love you. I know I have no right to say it. No, it doesn't change anything. But I need you to hear it. You saved my life 15 years ago with a song. You saved it again by helping me finish this. You're the best thing that's come from all this darkness." Tears burned my eyes. "I love you too. That's why I have to go. Because loving you means wanting more for you than eternal revenge. And you're not ready to want that for yourself." Our final kiss tasted of salt and regret, and all the futures we'd never have. Then I pulled away, picking up my small bag, becoming Sarah Mitchell, walking away from Dominic Kane, and the strange, intense, impossible love we'd built from captivity and conspiracy. Victor drove me to the private airport without speaking, understanding that words were useless. The plane was small but comfortable, and as it lifted into gray November skies, I watched Dominic's estate disappear below, taking with it the most intense, terrifying, alive few months of my life. Epilogue. 6 months later. The jazz club in Portland was smaller than the Velvet Room, more intimate, with better acoustics, and an owner who actually appreciated music. I performed 3 nights a week under my new name, building a following slowly but steadily, this time without crushing debt or desperate circumstances driving me. Sarah Mitchell had a nice life, a small apartment with actual heat, savings in the bank, the freedom to choose her own path. She was everything Diana Reeves had dreamed of being, back when she'd been drowning in debt and impossibility. But Diana was who I still was inside. Diana who'd infiltrated the Volkovs' inner circle and helped destroy them. Diana who'd fallen for a man defined by revenge. Diana who'd chosen freedom over love because she'd understood they couldn't coexist. Not for him. Not yet. I followed the news obsessively those first few months. The raids had been spectacular. Simultaneous operations across the city. Dozens of arrests. Assets frozen. An empire crumbling in real-time coverage. Dmitri and Katerina were awaiting trial, their lawyers already negotiating plea deals that would still mean decades in prison. Their sons had fled the country, their associates turning on each other, the power vacuum spawning violence as rivals fought for territory. And Dominic Kane had become a hero. The businessman who'd bravely provided evidence against organized crime, who'd risked his life to bring down the people who'd murdered his family. There were profiles in magazines, interviews on news programs, speculation about political aspirations. He looked good on screen, polished, controlled, saying all the right things about justice and civic duty. But I saw the tightness around his eyes, the carefully controlled expression that hid whatever he was really feeling. He'd gotten his revenge, destroyed his family's murderers completely, and it had cost him everything else. I was finishing my second set one Thursday night, singing "I'll Be Seeing You" to a crowd that actually listened when I saw him. He sat at a corner table, dressed casually in jeans and a dark sweater, no bodyguards visible, though I was certain they were nearby. His dark eyes were fixed on me with an intensity I remembered, a hunger I recognized. My voice nearly faltered, but I pushed through, finishing the song with control I didn't feel. The applause was warm, and I murmured my thanks, announcing a short break before the final set. I could have ignored him, could have retreated to the back room and sent word through the manager that I didn't want to be disturbed. But I'd never been good at denying what I wanted, even when I should. I wove through tables to where he sat, my heart hammering, and slid into the chair across from him. "Sarah Mitchell," he said, testing the name. "It suits you. Fresh start, new beginning, everything I promised." "How did you find me?" "Please." I built an intelligence network capable of destroying the Volkovs. Finding one woman with a distinctive voice who loves performing jazz wasn't difficult. His smile was slight, tired. "Though I did wait 6 months to make sure you were settled before showing up." "Why are you here, Dominic?" He leaned forward, his eyes never leaving mine. "Because revenge is hollow. Because destroying them didn't bring my family back or fix what was broken in me. Because every day for 6 months, I've woken up in that house we shared, walked past the music studio I built for you, and realized I chose wrong. You chose what you needed to choose. You needed closure, needed to finish what you started 15 years ago. I needed you more. It just took me losing you to understand that." His hand crossed the table, palm up, an offering rather than a demand. "I can't undo what I did. Can't erase how we started or the choices I forced on you. But I can offer you something I couldn't before. A future without revenge driving it, without agendas or manipulation. Just us figuring out what we could be if we were actually free." I stared at his hand, at the possibility it represented. The smart choice was to walk away, to protect the life I'd built from the dangerous, complicated man who'd upended my world. But wisdom had never been my strong suit. And love, real, complicated, imperfect love, rarely made sense. "I don't forgive you for kidnapping me," I said clearly. I don't excuse the manipulation or the forced participation in your revenge. What we started with was wrong. I know. But what we became. I took his hand, felt his fingers tighten around mine. That was real. Is real. And if you're really here because you choose me over revenge, choose life over destruction, then maybe we figure out what comes next. Together. His smile transformed his face, erasing the hardness, revealing the man beneath the vendetta. Together, he agreed. I had one more set to perform, and he stayed through all of it, watching with that intensity I'd grown addicted to, that made me feel seen and valued and necessary. And when I sang my final song, at last, I sang it to him specifically, to the impossible love we'd forged from darkness, to the future we were choosing, despite everything that should have kept us apart. After we walked through Portland's rain-slicked streets, talking about everything and nothing, about the life we might build now that revenge no longer defined him. He told me he'd sold most of his businesses, keeping only the legitimate ones, that he'd established a foundation in his family's name to support victims of organized crime. He was trying to be better, to transform destruction into creation, though it was harder than he'd imagined. I told him about Sarah Mitchell's quiet life, about performing without desperation driving it, about the strange emptiness of safety without purpose. I'd been surviving again rather than living, marking time rather than building anything meaningful. We're both broken, he said as we stood outside my apartment building, rain falling gently around us. But maybe broken things can become something new when you put them together right. That's very poetic for a former crime lord. I'm not a crime lord. I'm a businessman with regrettable associations who heroically brought down organized crime. Remember? His smile was self-deprecating. The PR team made sure everyone knows the official narrative. And the truth? The truth is I'm a man who spent 15 years becoming a monster to destroy other monsters. And I'm trying very hard to remember how to be human again. He pulled me closer, his arms encircling my waist. You make me feel human, Diana. Sarah. Whoever you want to be. Both, I decided. Diana is who I was, who I became with you. Sarah is who I'm trying to be. Maybe I can be both. Then I'll love both versions. The survivor and the artist. The captive and the partner. The woman who sang in a church, and the one who infiltrated the Volkovs. All of you. Our kiss tasted of rain and possibility, and the bittersweet knowledge that love built from such complicated circumstances would never be simple. But simple had never interested me anyway. This won't be easy, I warned against his lips. We have trauma to work through, trust to rebuild, a completely insane origin story to make peace with. I know, but you're worth fighting for. Worth being better for. His hand found mine, our fingers interlacing. And maybe we both deserve the chance to find out who we can be when we're not just surviving, not just seeking revenge, but actually living. I invited him up, and this time when we crossed the threshold together, it was a choice rather than a command, a beginning rather than an ending. We'd started in darkness, built something strange and intense and impossible in shadows and deception. But maybe, just maybe, we could grow into something sustainable in the light. Something that acknowledged our broken pieces while building toward wholeness. Something that honored where we'd been while refusing to be defined by it. The rain continued outside, washing away the past and revealing the future. Fragile and uncertain, but finally, genuinely ours to choose. And that, I decided, was the only freedom that truly mattered. Not the freedom from circumstances or obligations, but the freedom to choose who we became, who we loved, who we built ourselves into despite everything that should have destroyed us.